Good evening, everybody. I see that we have all of our counselors with us, and I believe we have the staff that we're expecting for tonight's meeting as well, plus a few members of the public. So I'll just ask our clerk, is there anybody we're expecting that is not on the call at this point?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. No, I don't believe there is.
So we can get started. I would like then to call the meeting to order at 6:33 p.m. and we'll begin as usual with the playing of our national anthem, followed by the Indigenous Land Acknowledgement Statement. The municipality of Whitestone recognizes all of Canada resides on traditional, unceded, and/or treaty lands of the Indigenous people of Turtle Island. We recognize our municipality on the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory is home to many past, present, and future Indigenous families. This acknowledgement of the land is a declaration of our commitment and collective responsibility to reconcile the past and to honor and value the culture, history, and relationships we have with one another. Next, I will ask if any councillor has a pecuniary interest to declare. All right, hearing none, let the record show that there was no pecuniary interest declared. I would like to take the opportunity just before we start to introduce a new face from our staff, and he's turned his camera off. But Manish, if you felt like turning it on just for a second so people can see you, our new treasurer, Manish Kulal. This is his first council meeting, and so I'm pleased to welcome him, especially to this meeting.
Hey, George, this is Manish. I'm trying to put some video, some problem with the internet. I couldn't put the video start, some issue. It's a tough time.
Well, that's okay. I know you were showing up there just before we started, but I wanted people to recognize who you are anyway, Manish. So don't worry about it. You can leave it off if it's.
Thank you for warm welcome, George.
All right. So our first item of business then would be to approve the agenda as circulated. If I could have a mover and seconder, please.
I'll move it, Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. Seconded by.
I'll second, Councillor Woods.
Thank you, Councillor Woods. Any discussion about the agenda? Okay, is there any opposition? Hearing none. That agenda is approved. So we don't have any matters arising from our closed session because we did not have one before the meeting started. And we don't have any presentations or delegations this evening. So the next group of items are the planning items in section 5 of your agenda. Could I get a motion, please, to move into committee of the whole?
Also move,
I'll
Council
move.
McEwen.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen, seconded by,
I'll second, Councillor Woods.
thank you, Councillor Woods. And it is 6:38 PM, so and I assume there's no objection to moving in camera to discuss, or sorry, in committee of the whole to discuss these items. All right, thank you. So the first item that we have is our official plan amendment, our proposed official plan amendment number 2, which has been before council a number of times, and most recently on a special meeting that we had on April 12th to deal with this item. So what I'd like to do is call first on our planner, John Jackson. Welcome, John, and ask him to just bring everybody up to date on what's happened since our last meeting and highlight what's in front of us.
Thank you, Mayor Comrie. The official plan amendment to be considered tonight for adoption has involved 2 components, one relating to the use of trailers on vacant lands, which seems to have had some concerns, but relative to developing lands that are on private roads, not fronting on water, quite a bit less concern. We've come a long way in terms of the evolution of the policy. So I think we are getting very close to a position where we can adopt the official plan amendment with a number of changes that were actually discussed by council at the April 12th meeting. There was one suggestion relating to the trailer bylaw to consider an extension of the 30-day limits to a calendar year use of a trailer. And we're proposing that be increased to a 45-day, which was generally thought to be the consensus of council. So we're hoping that puts that essentially into a consensus position with the already understood policy provisions that come out of amendment number 2. There were, in addition to that, 3 changes that the municipality wished to include in the private road component portion of official plan amendment number 2. The first one was to change language that didn't use the word discourage when considering it, but to say that they would consider it. To be more clear, there was a need to be more clear in terms of the description of what character meant. And the municipality, thirdly, didn't want the standards to be part of the proposed amendment. So with that, we have proposed a series of changes. I wanted to add a further clarification upon reflection to the first item I spoke of, and that is to change the word discourage private road use, where there were two places in the draft document that made reference to discouraging, and I only changed it in one. And so what I'd like to suggest to council to be very clear on the point is to suggest one additional adjustment to the amendment, which is in section 5, referring to 5.1 of the actual amendment. It appears on page 4 of the official plan amendment that the reference to the criteria that council wants included has a preamble to that in 9.06, where it says that the municipality discourages new development on private roads, which, if I could describe the context there, is if we had a number one choice, we'd like every property out there to be on public roads, and we know that is not achievable, at least in the present state of affairs. So the idea is that that first paragraph, which reads, the municipality discourages new development on private roads. The municipality does recognize that there may be instances where some infill development may be considered on non-waterfront lands that are accessed by a registered right-of-way. And it's the next section that we did change. Council will consider such requests for development on said lands where it can be satisfied that the following criteria are regarded. What I'd like to suggest, Mayor Comrie, is that that first paragraph on 9.06 actually be deleted. So 9.06 would simply now say, council will consider such requests for development on said lands where it can be satisfied the following criteria are appropriately regarded. And I think the reason I think we can support that last minute amendment is that the context that this sits in already recognizes that our first choice for any development is on private or public roads. So this is just merely adding the further exception that can be made. So it's a matter of clarity and not to create any confusion. I hope what I've described doesn't create more confusion, but it's simply, I think, aligning itself with the language that council wanted to be included in OPA number 2 on that particular matter. So I think we're close, if that is understood by me, in terms of proceeding. And the little memo that I added to the draft official plan amendment sets out a bit of the process, which will probably take us a number of months into the future before this actually becomes in full force and effect. I think that we may not see it fly through, in the sense that the province always, who are the approval authority, wants to add a few changes here and there that will be discussed between them and the council of the municipality. So that little amendment, it would be to the text. It doesn't change, I think, the adoption bylaw. That kind of puts this as part of the package. This is more or less the attachment to that adopting bylaw. So with that, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them for council.
Okay, thank you, John. The just so everyone can follow along where we are, the amendments are in front of you there on page 13 of 118, and you will see at the top of it, it says section 5 specific amendments. This is section 5 of the report, and it refers to section 9.06, which is entitled private roads. And you can see underneath what our planner, the wording that our planner came up with, and that he just suggested the under 9.06.6, the first paragraph could be removed, so that it would 9.0606.6 would read, council will consider requests for development, for new development on private roads where it can be satisfied, etc. And then you can see the sections A through, I think it's F, H, sorry. Which follow, which are the conditions, and these are the ones that we discussed the last time this was before us. So I'll at this point, I will open the floor up for discussion by councilors to see if we've got what you intended at this point.
Mr. Mayor? Sorry, Councilor Lamb.
Yeah, Councillor McEwen, I think had his
Oh, no,
hand
that's
up
fine.
first,
I
if you don't mind, but go.
No, I just want, I don't want to make my comments at this point. I just wondered whether, the best thing to do, if we're going to discuss it as a council, is great. I can do it once we come out of committee of the whole. Or, is anyone from the public want to make any comment at this point? And then we can go into council, because I don't want to get into a big debate of who said what and take exception to that and whatever. So if there's no one from the public that wants to say anything, then, I don't care whether I comment on these changes after that or when we come out of the committee of the whole. So I don't know, but I do have some comments, obviously. Thank you. That's all I wanted to do.
Okay, well, thanks. If there are, we can do that. We can do it that way, because we certainly have an opportunity to discuss after we come out of committee of the whole. If we were going to proceed to approve the bylaw, that would be done in the bylaw section of the meeting later on. But anyway, I'll ask if there are members of the public who wanted to address this item right
hello,
now.
Mr. Mayor.
Sounds like Scott Nash.
Yes.
Go ahead, Scott.
Voice. I had actually a really quick, it's more of a comment, and I don't want to rehash anything, so I'm not trying to do that. It's just a simple question. I'm not sure if John could answer it or yourself. And all it was some time ago, it might have been in a report 6 months ago or even longer. At one point, there was a list of roads that were already existing private roads. And my simple question is simply, if there was a road that was missed on that list for existing back lots, would this policy be in place to say, if there's an existing road, when this bylaw passes, say it's tonight, backlot development may be allowed if it meets the following criteria that you've set out, even if a road may not have been listed on previous reports? Basically, I'm asking if there's a road that may have been missed. I don't know if there was or wasn't, but if there was a road that was missed, I guess that's my question. What would happen? Simple question. I don't want to, again, rehash anything or anything. It's just a simple question, because I'm not sure if that was ever asked or commented on. I thought about that when I was reading it.
John, do you want to?
Sure, thank you.
Answer the question.
Through you, during this process, council had asked, what are we dealing with in terms of general quantity, if you like, of properties? And so what we did was we keyed in a number of codes in the assessment mapping to inventory or catalog those, and that gave you a rough idea, but it's like all impact kind of information. It has limitations on its accuracy. So I think while it gave us a comfort level in terms of the number of properties we were talking about, it was far from accurate. It in its own right has no particular role other than to give council the understanding of what we're talking about in terms of numbers of properties. So the short answer is any property would qualify if it's considered land not fronting on water and not fronting on public road.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for the response. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Other questions or comments from the public?
Hi, Mr. Mayor. It's Robert Duda. I'd like to
Oh.
just say a quick comment.
Go ahead, Robert.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank council and John Jackson for all their efforts. This is an important policy and topic. Everybody's land is equal, and truly appreciate everybody's efforts. It's tough slogging, it's tough work, but everybody's efforts is well appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, well, I guess what we should do is give counselors an opportunity to make any comments that they have at this point. And if there are members of the public who still want to speak, you will have an opportunity. Councilor McEwen, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciative of the folks who zoomed in with us tonight, called in. Thank you. I have a couple points I'd like to discuss, I guess. Going back to the trailers on the vacant lots, I thought we were looking at or asking for a notation that would support septic systems, something like proper disposal of septic waste. And when I went back through the MMA report that they sent back to us, the ministry, they were supportive of a recommendation for safeguarding against improper disposal. So that is one item I think, in my mind, I'd like to see in the in permissions, if you will, if it's not in there someplace on trailers or vacant lots.
So, John, do you want to? Is that something that's going to come when we get the trailer bylaw, or is that something that, or should we be able to find it somewhere in the?
I thought it was in the amendment, Your Worship, just checking out here.
I don't think so.
I'm not seeing it, which is curious because I thought that we were very much going to highlight that as. I think
Yeah,
that
I couldn't find it either, John. That's why I'm asking.
I don't see it here. So I think we can certainly add it. It's kind of like adding suspenders to a belt in the sense that you need to comply with the building code requirements for these temporary placements. That is to say, you need a building permit, and the building inspection process requires that you have compliance with the servicing requirements as well. So I think we can insert that, Your Worship, in that section. So I would say that that is another amendment that can be inserted because I'm not seeing it.
I just thought it would be good in a submission to the ministry as they had suggested such wording of sorts. Mr. Mayor, if there's no further comments from councilors on trailers, I have a couple I'd like to discuss on the private road.
If you'd indulge me for a second, Councilor McEwen, I just wanted to make note of the fact that, well, two things actually. First of all, the we had discussed at the last meeting, if you go back and look at Mr. Jackson's April 25th report, you'll see that we had discussed increasing the length of time that a trailer could be on vacant land, increasing it from 30 days to 45 days. And I noticed as I was reading this that that wasn't there, but the response I got was, oh, well, that'll come when we do the trailer bylaw, because right now we don't, we would have to reintroduce once we approve the official plan amendment, we would have to reintroduce a trailer bylaw. But I'm also curious if someone is just occupying the vacant land using a trailer for the however many days it is, why would they have a building permit? They won't have a building permit. Will they?
Yes, the way that the zoning bylaw is worded is that the placement of any structure on a property which defines trailers as a structure are required to be permitted. So there wouldn't necessarily be any construction, but that permission has to go through the building permit process.
So I wonder if I can ask then, maybe our CAO might know. When we did have a trailer bylaw, were we issuing building permits for people to put their trailers on vacant land? Because if we were, that's news to me. I'm not not that I necessarily know everything that's going on, but I'm just a little surprised at that. I don't remember it being in the trailer bylaw, so I'm just wondering if I hear what our planner is saying, but I don't know. Did we do that?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Mayor. That was before my time. When I arrived at Whitestone, there was no trailer bylaw. So I don't have a good answer for you.
Mr. Mayor, I do.
Well, please provide it, Councilor Lamb.
I go back 14 or 15 years, I guess, or in my 15th year. As far as I know, the previous trailer bylaw, which allowed trailers for up to 30 days, in my opinion, did not require a building permit. There was an exception in 2000 or 2005, whenever the original trailer bylaw was passed. There were a number of trailers that were permanently on properties that were grandfathered. Now, I suspect that over the years, all those have fallen off the shelf and we don't have any sort of grandfathered ones anymore. But as far as I know, you never needed to get a permit to have a trailer on your property. But, you know, I stand to be corrected, but I don't ever recall that. As the mayor just mentioned, I don't think it was in the previous trailer bylaw.
Well, okay, thank you, Councilor Lamb, not to prolong this. It sounds like Mr. Jackson has agreed that we should make reference to the requirement for proper treatment of waste and I'll just ask one more time my question about the 30 or 45 days. Should that be in the official plan, or can it be left until we actually have the trailer bylaw?
I think that particular standard can exist in the trailer bylaw and therefore be changed more readily up or down as council may see fit. So I would do that. Whereas I think Councillor McEwen's recollection from the ministry's comments on the draft trailer policy changes was very much aligned with the notion that make sure you deal with wastewater issues. Mm-hmm. So we know that that's been flagged and we should do it at the policy level as well.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. And sorry for this detour. Councillor McEwen, please continue.
Well, are we going to, excuse me, but are we going to deal with the trailer bylaw? I think Councilor McEwen said he wanted to go on to the private road issues, but I mean, I have some comments on the trailers if we're going to stay
Oh,
there.
all right, sorry. Well,
Uh,
then let's carry on with trailers. Yes,
Okay, whatever your desire is, Mr. Mayor, I just, I mean,
No,
I've got
no.
comments on trailers and the private roads, so I think we should kind of deal with the trailers first and then move on to the private road issue.
fair enough.
Okay. So the comments I have, John, with respect to, and again, I'm like the mayor. If we're going to have a specific trailer bylaw come to us in the next month or two, that will cause a debate at council, which I'm fine with, on number of days and gray water and these sorts of things, and that's fine. But as I look at the document here as it's written, you know, I don't have a big problem with the trailer part, but I just want to make sure that you know that at least my comments on this whole issue are as follows. When the trailer bylaw comes, I stated, I don't think anyone should be grandfathered. So that's very important because we haven't had a trailer bylaw. There's a bunch of trailers out there that have come up in the last 5 years where people are going to argue, oh, no, I've had mine for 4 years. You just passed the trailer bylaw. I'm grandfathered. So I think that's important that we state nobody gets grandfathered. That if you currently have a trailer there for 30 days or whatever, you're going to have to get a permit or whatever, right? So that's number one. Number two, the 30 versus 45 days, I have a different recollection as to the consensus of council, as you say. My recollection was that Councillor Gorham Matthews brought up the idea of extending it to 45 days. I brought up the point that I didn't necessarily agree with that because, you know, the previous bylaw was 30 days forever. We have things in your documentation, Mr. Jackson, and from the bylaw officer, the 30 days was fine. Never had a problem, never an issue. So just to say, well, let's increase it to 45. One of the issues that we have here is we want to encourage development on lots and not discourage it. And I'm afraid that, and again, we can have this debate when we get to the trailer bylaw, I guess, but I'm afraid that extending it to 45 will make it much easier for people to say, I'll put a trailer on my property, on my vacant land for 45 days, which is most of the summer, and I'll really never build. I'll just take it off at the end of the summer. And I think 30 days is reasonable. I think 45 in my mind is too much. So that's my comment there. In terms of the gray water, I agree with Councillor McEwen. I had a note here on the trailers. I had mentioned again at the last meeting about gray water. I want it dealt with in a bylaw. I don't want people to bring a trailer in for 45 days and be unregulated when it comes to wastewater. So we need to deal with that particular issue. Those are, I guess, just let me look here, see if there's any other comments. Okay, that's all I have in the trailers. I think all those issues hopefully can be discussed and debated by council and decided by council when the actual trailer bylaw comes to us. Is that a correct interpretation, Mr. Jackson?
I think you've nailed it pretty well. The only thing that I do realize that some of council were talking about a change in the amount of time that might be considered for the trailers. And I think that debate is better left as part of the details of the actual trailer bylaw, which will probably include a number of items. So I think the policy basis is still sound that we'll consider them. And there's no question the history was that the enforcement department had no issues with the 30 days. And so I'm sure that they'll chime in very quickly to say what they think of an extension of that. So that's quite accurate. I've suggested that we add further policy that simply says all trailer placements are required to meet requirements for wastewater disposal. And I think was something that all of council supported. And I do recall, as I said, that the ministry had that comment. I did look at the bylaw in terms of building permission, and the definition of a trailer is that it's a broad definition, but part of the definition is that it's to be considered a building for the purposes of this bylaw. So you almost need to go to the CBO to see how he would actually administer it. And I don't know the answer to that. So I think your recollection and comments are quite correct.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Are there other questions or comments relating to the trailer portion of this official plan amendment?
Mr. Mayor, I have one quick one.
Councillor Woods, go ahead, please.
The section about the wastewater. So are we saying, so if somebody comes up, they have a holding tank for their wastewater in their trailers and they're coming up for a weekend, that we're not going to allow them to put it on the property for a weekend until they have a septic or like an outhouse installed on the property? Or could they just use the tank that they have in their trailer and then go dump it at a facility?
My interpretation through you, your worship, would be that the Blackwater tank on the particular vehicle or trailer would satisfy that policy. It's only when they wanted to actually put something more permanent to allow for greater flows and water usage. So for example, they couldn't just run a pipe on the ground. They'd have to get the required permissions for whatever system that they were going to use, whether it's gray water or a combination of gray water and pit privy or septic. So they can do it either way. It can be done within the trailer itself. Some have the ability to sustain their use for like perhaps up to a week or maybe even two. My experience with them, which is limited, probably they have up to a 50 or 75 gallon storage capability. So beyond that, they would need to get the required permissions from North Bay Mattawa.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor, sorry again,
Go ahead.
because I think we have to get this thing right. The building permit part bothers me, and like you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think that ever showed up before. So we have things like we introduced the fire permitting system. We're looking at parking, and people can easily go on to the website. They don't have to pay for it. They just go and they get their permit. Away they go. They get their conditions, and it's an easy peasy system. I think that by putting in that you need to have a building permit will cause a complexity that people will just ignore it, because building permit, as far as I know, can't be for free, but maybe it can. But again, why that complexity? Can't we write something that just says you can go on and get a permit for up to 30 days? Here it is. We have a record of who's gone in, who hasn't, and it's easy peasy, instead of making this building permit thing. So I only put that as a comment. I guess we can, again, deal with that when the trailer bylaw comes to us. But, I have some issue with saying, you got to get a hold of the CBO and get a building permit and all that, because I think people will say, just to heck with it, right? I'll take my chances and work on a complaint basis. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just making a note that there is this potential conflict with the zoning bylaw, which I wasn't aware of. but-
And if I can offer
Yeah.
this through your worship, in the bylaw, it says for the purpose of this bylaw, trailer is considered a building. And that may just be for yards, like side yard, setback, rear yard, et cetera, or height, not that that should be an issue. So it may very well be that the building department is not actually administering the issuance of a permit. But I know in a lot of municipalities they do. So it does need clarification. And remember, it's in the zoning bylaw, so it's not in the policy platform that procedure needs to be discussed. So I think we can solve this through a clarification of that.
Okay, thank you. So are there any further questions or comments regarding the trailer portion of the amendment? From anyone? Going once. All right, if there's nothing further on trailers, perhaps we can move back to the private roads issue. And Councillor McEwen, you were,
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I have a couple of comments on, and I hate to say it, but it goes back to character. And character was well identified in the latest brief from Wabash Cash Association, and I've had a couple phone calls from people on it. And what's interesting in it, the more I look at it, is going back to the issuance or the report from Mr. Jackson, January 31st. It had a brief little A caption here for character. It's similar to the one that he has in the amended one, although it's a lot wordier in the amended one from what I see. But question I have is why we would ask for rezoning in there and as a character comment or notation when the rezoning is, I think, in like a broader sense in the OP and under the bylaws. I'm thinking if we refer to severance, you would go to RU, for instance, and that was something noted in the letter from Wabash Cash also, that why are we looking at rezoning to a whole series of different zoning? Maybe we should be specific, and if the property is suitably sized, it goes without question to our zoning, and no need to rezone. Rezoning is a big deal for people. I know it notifies neighbors, but I think if we're going to be putting something out in a format that will be potentially severed with suitably large lots, then going to an RU status pretty much states it. And we are covering off the waterfront. I guess we're staying away from waterfront in this case, pardon me, it's back lot. But to ask for rezoning under character, I don't think that has a place there at all. It's just totally in the wrong spot, I think. If we go to the OP official plan and use the official plan for scoping out and defining what the character would be, I don't think we need rezoning as a required item in there under character. Maybe Mr. Jackson can enlighten me a little bit on this character thing.
yes, I had a similar question, and so
So did I.
about this. So, John, I think maybe you do have an answer, please.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I guess, you know, the nature of our instruments are that we allow for uses to occur, but the condition is that you can develop a property or obtain a building permit under two access conditions. One is that you're on a year-round publicly maintained road or by a private right-of-way, as long as it's a lakefront property. So that's the way the zoning reads right now, and it's based on the policy underlying it. The only way that you could transform a property that's not on water and not on a public road is to change the zoning. I think if I understand Councillor McEwen's comment, he would like to wholesale change the zoning bylaw so individuals in these circumstances would be eligible for a building permit subject to meeting the minimum size for a rural lot, for example. And I think that probably could work, but I think it kind of disregards the consideration of neighbors for input in terms of a submission where they think that you're going to change an area in some kind of impactful or undesirable way. And so I don't know of any other mechanism other than going through a rezoning to allow someone to place a dwelling on a lot that under the present policy and zoning regime is not allowed. So you can do it in a blanket way, or you can do it by individual rezoning. Is it onerous? Yeah, it can be. It's going to be, there's going to be a cost, and there's going to be a process, and it's going to be on an individual basis. But is that trade-off worth it? And that's not for me to decide. That's for council to decide. So I suppose the short answer would be, if you want to allow for these as a wholesale permission, you do that in the zoning bylaw without any consideration by the criteria that's set out in this format.
A little further to that, Mr. Jackson, I could, if it is a severable size of property, maybe it's 75 acres and they're going to break it into 3 pieces or whatever, then that definitely goes out to the neighbors as part of the planning format, as I understand it. And I guess the second thing, if you're talking about rezoning, are you looking at an RU and putting an exception to each of these as they come up? Or are you looking at a separate zoning category?
If you're doing it individually, I think you would do it by exception. So if you don't do it individually and you create a whole new category that allows development subject to certain zoning standards, such as lot size and amount of private road frontage, for example, you really don't have the benefit of trying to assess the appropriateness of it in terms of the concerns that were expressed through this process by submissions by, for example, some of the associations that have indicated they're really concerned about how the nature of their neighborhoods might be altered to an extent of concern. But again, that would either be done by individual application or by blanket, and that's for council to decide.
Okay, I guess part of my questioning comes from a letter we just received, one of the latest from Wawashkesh. And if we do go ahead with permitting, if we get the approval from ministry and such, I think one of their comments was that possibly considering size of property. RU, I believe, is 2 hectares now. Am I correct on that? That's
Yeah,
approximately 4 acres. So that's a reasonable piece of property, really. But yeah, okay. Okay, so you think rezoning is the way to go? That would be your suggestion? Is that what I hear?
Well, I think it's the balance that I heard in terms of the concerns for and against this new approach to non-waterfront lots accessed by private lanes.
Okay. Okay, I'll leave it with others too. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Councilor Lamb.
Yeah, I have several things that I asked indulgence of council to go through. Just as we're talking about that rezoning, I don't think we need it. So my thought is that, obviously, if you're going to sever a property, then that needs to go through the whole process. But we've got basically 60 lots that are various sizes that we've identified potentially could they put a building on. I think to go through rezoning and all the fees, et cetera, to do that, I think is unnecessary. So I'm kind of going along with Councillor McEwen's first thought on this. Why are we rezoning and putting through a bunch of rigorous things? Why don't we just simply say that these 60 lots or whatever number of lots on current existing roads can get a building permit, and full stop, and then make whatever arrangements or that we need to do on zoning bylaws or anything else, rather than put the rigor up of give us $2,000 and we'll go through all this. So I don't think we need it, but anyway, that's just my thought. So here's the changes or comments that I would make with respect to the draft. When it came to private roads, 4.1, it says it's the policy of the municipality to not allow. I would put the word current in front of policy. It is the current policy of the municipality. It's not the new policy. So I put the word current in. In section 4.5, it says the municipality has a number of tools available for ensuring safeguards are to place to discount traditional concerns over private roads. These include, the issue I have with that is it says private road standards. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but the only thing that I know of in a private road standards is to say the municipality will take over a road if you do this, that, and that. But I don't.
Excuse me, sorry. I apologize for interrupting, Councillor Lamb, but I just want to get clarification on something. You're looking at section 4 of Mr. Jackson's report. That's not part of the amendment. That is just part of the description. Am I not correct, Mr. Jackson? That
Yes.
doesn't, the section 4 basis of the amendment does not form part of the amendment. That's just explanatory material. So that's not going to appear in the official plan. It's just for the benefit of this discussion.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm following it. It's just what we've got, or what we got. Isn't this what he's kind of sort of proposing?
No, he has provided us with a report which has sections 1 through 4 are preamble and discussion about how did we get where we are, what's the philosophy behind it, etc. The actual amendment does not start until you get to section 5. Am I
I don't follow
is that correct, Mr. Jackson? Please.
Yeah, the actual policy is found in section 5. So that's what will be the language that will direct what essentially is followed by
Okay.
property owners wishing to develop on private roads.
That's page 13 of 118. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. But I just, again, I'll be quick. I just want to, that was the only comment I had with respect to 4.5. If any document is going to say that we have toolboxes like private road standards, I don't think that's right. I don't think we have private road standards. And my question is, do we have private road standards? And if so, what are they? Where do I find them?
No, we do not.
So why
those,
is it in there is my question.
those would have been considered upon an individual application context. And it may very well be that you don't want anything to do with private road standards.
We don't. We've made that clear, I thought, last time. But anyway.
Now, the only thing.
Okay, I will go to section 5. Okay. I'm glad that you've taken out discourages in that whole paragraph. I had a great big question mark there. So you pretty much addressed this. Under character, again, the rezoning, I've made my position clear as to what I would do with it. I have some issues with character. We've now tried to define it. So I guess my first question on character is, where did you get this definition of character?
Well, when there was uncertainty about what would be meant by character, I thought, well, we we should resolve that not by removing it, but being more precise about what it should be considered in terms of a definition. So I guess I made it up. But
Well,
I think
yeah,
to
so
limit is to, I think, eliminate a concern that was expressed during the public submissions. And I'm not sure that that's it's a potential risk is all I'm saying. And,
well, I
and you
guess,
have,
sorry.
I just want
I
to
guess
finish.
my comment on character is that, quite frankly, I think it just adds a level of complexity that I don't think is necessary. Everyone's definition of character, they shouldn't be able to build on that back lot because I like walking up and down the street and looking at all the trees and whatever. And, they're going to build this house that's going to change the character of my walk or my neighborhood or whatever. And I think that's something that shouldn't necessarily be in there. And that concerns me a little bit. I'll give you an example. I remember when I was in the city 4 or 5 years ago, there was a set of townhouses that was being built, and I said to my wife, boy, they look really industrial, right? The flat roofs, and they look like, they look out of place, right? I don't like them. That would change the character of that neighborhood. But guess what? 5 years later, there's all kinds of those buildings, and I kind of like them. And so I don't want to get to the point of someone saying, they're going to put this doggone house up that's flat roof, doesn't look like a cottage. It's going to change the character in the neighborhood. So I just have some really concerns that, people will jump on the character thing as a reason to not let these back lots develop. And I think the will of council is that there's 60 lots, let them develop. If they need to sever, let them sever. That's a different set of circumstances. But if you have a lakefront lot right now, you don't have to go anywhere and except get a building permit and build. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I feel about character. I think I don't think it should be in, but that's only my thought. I also have to concern in the last paragraph of A, I think it's A, yeah, that the council's determination of impacts on character is final. My question is, what does that mean? This wouldn't, a person couldn't take it to OMB or something, or John, can you explain to me what?
I think I was trying to make it clear that you couldn't, using your example, couldn't say, I don't like the roof line on that property, therefore I think it's out of character. I was trying to give it some substantive kind of platform rather than just allow for the wishy-washy kind of description of what someone's opinion might be. And an analogy to that would be beauties in the eye of the beholder, or your townhouse example. I think that they have to realize that when the rubber hits the road, council is going to determine what that impact is. But I also have to back up and remind council that if you put a policy in that said development can be permitted on private roads and just leave it at that, I think that the province might have a problem with that. Remember, we're going back and taking advantage of the fact that the province's jar finally broke after many, many attempts to crack it in the town of Hearst. And that was the first place about 5 years ago that they ever allowed any consideration of private roads, but they put a number of hooks on it. And if we try to take any of what I'll call the hooks the province wants to see in place, take them away completely, we risk getting chucked out as an opportunity for allowing the consideration of such development. So keep that in mind. I mean, I'm not necessarily agreeing with the province, but I'm trying to indicate an anticipation of what might happen if we were simply to say, we're just going to allow private road development.
Okay, that's fair, Paul. I guess I would like to point out, Mr. Jackson, that we keep referring to Hearst and have all along. But if you look at the Hearst bylaw and what was passed, there's no mention at all of character.
No,
It's just not mentioned, so it's not part of the Hearst.
No, that is not, you're correct, but I thought in my respectful opinion, that was part of the number of association submissions particularly, and other submissions as well, not just association.
But our job and my job is to do the right thing for the community and do it to the best of my ability. And again, I said at the last meeting, and I'll say again, I don't want to introduce or have a level of complexity of rezoning and permits and a big rigmarole to just put a building on a back lot, one building, one house or whatever, right? They can put a hunt camp in there now, but they want to put a building, they want to put a road in or to a driveway in and put a building in. I don't see the level of complexity that maybe others do, but that's again, just me. So that's my comment there. I'll be quick. The other comment is under G. The municipality is satisfied that there are arrangements in place that provide for the ongoing maintenance for the private road. I thought we said at the last meeting, we wanted nothing to do with private roads. We don't own them, we don't determine them, we don't have jurisdiction over them. So why would we do this? That to me is an issue between the owner of the road, whoever it is, the private road, and the applicant. They have right of ways over them. That's perhaps a legal issue. I don't think that that's necessary for us to get into private road issues. And so that's my comment on G.
I think it was H. Mr. Ronaldo.
Pardon? Sorry.
I think that was H, was it not? Maintenance?
Sorry, what did I? Yeah, no, it's G on mine, maintenance.
Oh, okay. Oh,
It
yeah, on
is-
the new one it is. Sorry, I'm stuck on the old. Okay,
Yeah, so
great.
maintenance, I don't think that's necessary in there. What are you gonna do? You're gonna get into a private road issue that maybe someone who owns the road doesn't want someone to have a building on the back lot. So they say, no, we're not agreeing to this, or we don't want this. I own the road, it's not gonna happen. That to me is a legal issue between the property owner and the private road owner. I don't think it's something that the municipality says, oh, can't do it because the owner of the road doesn't want it, right? And we're getting ourselves involved in private roads that we don't own. Certainly on assumed roads is a little different because, we own them, and I guess they can get permission from the municipality. But I just, again, that's my comment. I apologize if this is,
If
my
I might,
complaints are a little.
if I might respond to that, my sense there was that it was kind of an advertisement for the municipality's private road program where it offers assistance to users as much as anything. So it was in that context more than it was to say that we would be dissatisfied, but more so that, hey, look, you got a private road grant program that you can participate in. Be aware of it.
Separate issue, they can deal with it themselves. Every road does, it takes advantage of the road grant. But I just think, again, it's a level of complexity that's not necessary. And I guess my overall comment is that, I think council is very much in favor of these 60 lots or so being developed. And so why don't we just, as I say, do it? There's got to be some restrictions, I guess. But I mean, I just think it's overdoing it. So anyway, I've made my comments clear. They're the same sort of comments that I had last time. I think they should be weighed in our decision making. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before I ask further comments, I wonder if we could just revisit one of the items that was raised a couple minutes ago. And my question to our planner, I guess, is it possible to distinguish? Because I hear counselors trying to make this distinction, and I kind of understand where they're coming from. Is it possible to make a distinction between getting a building permit to build on a lot versus, division of land division, as i.e. severances, subdivision, new lot creation, whatever you want to call it. So if somebody's not trying to create a lot, they just want to build on it. Is it possible for us to make a distinction between that? Because things like, for example, the rezoning might very well be necessary if you were going to, you'd have to do, if you wanted to actually build a subdivision, you would have to do a whole lot of things.
You're
It
right.
seems to me. So my question is, what about if someone just wants to build? Is it necessary to have a zoning bylaw? Is it necessary to have the same sort of level of diligence on what it's apt to do to the neighborhood, so to speak?
Well, I guess the reality is that you can't build on a private road today. Our bylaw, our official plan doesn't allow it. Our zoning bylaw doesn't allow it. The province approves our policy, so we have to take the policy change to the province and say, here's our policy change. Once the province says, okay, we'll approve that policy change, then we change our zoning bylaw to say you can build on a private road. In which case you could get a building permit, obviously. There is a distinction in terms of process to divide new lots. And that distinction is governed by different sections of the Planning Act. So if you want to divide property, you've got to go through either a plan of subdivision or a consent, which has a number of assessments that have to be done. If you don't have to go through a land division and just get a building permit, that's between you and the building department. It's got nothing to do with any planning application. We do have a wall to climb, though, in terms of changing the policy that's supported by the province and then changing the zoning to reflect that policy. So until that point, these are the steps that have to be followed. And what concerns me is getting past the first step, which is having the province support our change in direction in that regard. So I'm worried that a blanket change might cause their hackles to say, no, we can't support a blanket change, in which case we couldn't change our zoning. And to change the zoning still has the risk of the process involved with it on a broader basis or a township-wide basis. So I'm trying to steer this whole program in a way that will effectively get somewhere for those 60 properties.
Oh, okay, so fair enough. I guess let me rephrase the question then. If we take the modification that you read to us at the beginning, that was up under the at the start of 9.06.6, which essentially says we'll consider requests for development. Now we have gone under A with we then go down to talk about. Well, we actually say in A, we say that zoning, such lands must be rezoned, will require that such lands be rezoned. Is it possible to make it because if we wanted to make a distinction between later on in how we apply the zoning bylaw, we would have to say this up in the official plan. Otherwise, we'd have to say something about it in the official plan to make a distinction between just building versus development. And when I see the word development, I mean, that to me says land division, right? But it's pretty clear that your interpretation of it is that it includes buildings. So I guess I'm asking, is it if we're going to try to make a distinction down the road, we've got to say something about that here. Am I correct?
I guess if I could say that if we abandon the criteria altogether, I'm concerned about the success of approving the policy change.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we abandon the criteria. I'm just suggesting that what if we were to change under A, it says council will require that such lands be rezoned. What if we said council may require that such lands be rezoned? Would that cause the whole thing to go tilt, in your opinion, or?
Mr. Mayor, I go back to Councillor Lamb's comment there. Why make it complicated for people? If they're severing their property, then they have to go through the planning process, and there will be rezoning potentially, or they're just going to smaller size lots still under an RU. If rezoning is necessary, then that's for severance purposes. Put that in there. Otherwise, we just permit them.
Here.
So you want to remove it entirely, I guess is what I hear you saying.
No, I want to see it.
The reference to rezoning.
No, I'd
Is
like
that
to see rezoning. Will only apply if necessary. I'm not sure what terminology is, so, but don't rezone something for the sake of rezoning it. Just to change the name of it.
Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councillor McEwen. There shouldn't be the need for rezoning if they're simply taking their lot as it exists and going in and getting a building permit. I don't think they need to be rezoned, so it should be taken out for that. Obviously, if they come to us and say, I want to split my land into this, or I want to sever, or I want to put a, God's sakes, a subdivision in, there's all kinds of hoops and things to go through. And I think council, or at least I'm saying, I think Councillor McEwen's saying, and you, Mr. Mayor, that in that case, you need to obviously go through all the hoops and things that are necessary. But I think we're all saying the same thing on council. I don't think that, well, I don't know, I'm not the planner. I don't think that should contaminate anything, but, with the province. But again, I'm not the planner. I don't think, for instance, saying the private road, you got to have an agreement or whatever, necessarily contaminates things. I think it gets into a level of complexity that will cause us problems when and if issues come forward. So there were only a couple changes that I had. Again, I think character is I mean, is it a game changer at the end of the day? Maybe not. Am I not going to vote for it because character's still in there? Not necessarily, but I'll tell you this, I predict that in the future, what's going to happen is people are going to use that phraseology for character and have all kinds of things. But I guess they won't have to deal with character if we say they don't have to be rezoned. So I don't mind character being in there, right? If 60 lots want to build on their lots, fine, let them do it. I don't care if you want to keep character in for rezoning, severances, that sort of thing, because that will have a greater impact on character, right? So maybe that's a solution to all this, right? We leave it in, but only say in the case of rezoning, right? Which is only necessary if you're severing or whatever, right? So I don't know whether that's what Councillor McEwen, I think, was getting at, and I'm getting at, and I think you are, Mr. Mayor. So.
All right. Well, if I may, the question that I was asking was hoping to get our planner to respond and to my. What about if we did a very simple thing, which was to say, council may require that such lands be rezoned instead of council will require? Is that in your opinion, problematic?
I don't think it's very helpful. I think if I'm understanding what the council's perspective is on this, I think they're saying council will consider development on private roads where they're satisfied there's a legal registered right of way. And that's the only criteria, that's the only policy, that consideration that they wish to adopt at this point. The rest all has a element of consideration that needs to be weighed, and it sounds like it's now a view that we simply say if you've got access, you're in, and let the future consents fall where they may.
Mr. Mayor,
That's
can I
not
ask
what-
one?
That's not what I'm
Sorry.
saying.
Sorry, with all due respect, that isn't what I said or what I heard other people saying. I'm not suggesting that character impacts right of way agreement, et cetera, be removed. I'm suggesting that it there be some flexibility incorporated into it. Those things would still apply no matter what. They would still apply to the person who's gonna have a building permit, but it makes it a simpler matter to we
But if you ask for, the way the process works though, building inspectors deal with applicable law, and policy is not applicable law. So it's ultimately what comes forward in the zoning bylaw. So you don't want to have a rezoning on a site-by-site basis. So there's really there's no assessment built into that as of right approach. So I'm just trying to consolidate my understanding of what you want to avoid someone going through a process simply to allow for a backlot to be eligible for a building permit. Am I missing something?
No, I hear what you're saying. I just anyway, we should have an opportunity for I don't want to kind of monopolize the conversation here. There are a
Mr.
couple
Mayor,
of
can I
our
have one?
counselors I haven't heard from.
If you want them first, fine. If not,
Yeah, then we'll figure out where we go from here. And
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, 5.1, the first big paragraph, 9.06.6, it ends with that are accessed by registered right of way. And then we go down to a specific C item down the page, right of way. I don't think right of way has to be in that. Again, it's kind of muddying the water up there at the top. Like character is, we have a right of way down the bottom, which is suitable, I think, in my mind. Municipality must be satisfied that the lands have a legal registered right of way or some clear public right to gain access to the property. That makes perfect sense because a lot of these are old locations where there's.
Okay, but if I may, the
Yeah.
first paragraph of 9.06.6 was removed when Mr. Jackson read it to us at the beginning of this discussion. So that paragraph that says the municipality discourages new development on private roads. Municipality does recognize that there may be instances, et cetera, that's gone. What
fine.
is left is the following: council will consider requests for development on private roads where it can be satisfied that the following criteria are appropriately regarded. So,
Okay,
so that's the reference to a right of way is gone out of 9.06.6 at the beginning and appears down under criterion
okay.
C. Okay.
all right, thank you.
Councillor Gorham Matthews, did you have your hand up?
I did, yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a couple comments. Most reflect what's already been said, but with regards to character, I understand it's a very objective or hard to characterize. Everyone has a different opinion on it, so it will be difficult to make that a final where we say council's determination of impacts on character is final. You know, I like the rest of the paragraph. That last sentence kind of throws me off. With regards to maintenance under G, I think the reason Mr. Jackson included this had to do with some of the concerns of the current owners of properties on the private roads with regards to fairness in maintenance. The situation now is that not everyone contributes to maintenance of the road, and by adding more properties back on these private roads without some sort of encouragement by the municipality for these new owners to contribute to the maintenance, there's no mechanism for to ensure fairness in all property owners contributing to the maintenance. So it will just kind of exacerbate the situation that's already happening on some of these private roads. I know for one like Amarak, not everyone contributes to the plowing and summer maintenance and such, and it creates friction among the property owners. And then by adding more properties, it's going to cause a little bit of resentment among these current owners on the private roads. So I wouldn't want to see the maintenance completely removed. Maybe we could just kind of reword it. You know, I don't think that we want to get into the business of dictating that someone has to pay someone to maintain a road. It should be between the owners of the roads, but perhaps we could say something like the municipality encourages that there are arrangements in place. You know, I'm not sure I want to see G completely removed, but I also don't want to get into the business of anything to do with maintaining private roads or dictating what they do. I'm just thinking that the reason Mr. Jackson had that section in there was to address those concerns by the current property owners.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor? Oh, sorry.
Um,
I wondered if I might just comment on what Councillor Gorham Matthews just said.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Just quickly, I don't disagree, but I'd like to put it on, you know, put it in the positive kind of, that when it comes to maintenance, that the applicant or the lot or whatever you want to call it agrees to participate in the ongoing maintenance of the private road. So, you know, as part of this, we get something from the applicant saying, you know, I'm building a house there, I agree, or I commit, or I do whatever to participate in the ongoing maintenance of the road. So that puts it on the applicant to say, I agree, not on perhaps a road association deciding they don't want someone to build on the other side. So we're going to get into a hassle between the owners of the road or the road association and the applicant. So I think a wording such as that might, Councillor Gorham Matthews said encourages, but you know, I think commits. So if I'm going to build on my lot, I have to give the municipality something saying, I'm going to participate along with other owners of the road in the ongoing maintenance, and they commit to that. So I'm okay with a change such as that. Sorry, that's just my comment. Thank you.
Councillor Woods, I haven't heard from you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think most of us are saying the same thing. We're all pretty much on the same page. The character one was one that had me stumbled. John, these back lots, they're zoned as rural lots now? Is that right?
I think they are primarily rural, but some of them may have a slight variation of that. But yeah, I think that's what I would generally see in terms of zoning. Now, the rural zone, like all residential zones that are non-waterfront, requires a year-round public road frontage.
Yeah. From what I'm hearing, and somebody tell me if I'm wrong, what we're all basically have said is if somebody wants to build a house on an existing piece, we should let them do it. If someone wants to subdivide and take a couple of lots off, they should have to do the zoning, the rezone. process. How is it possible to get there, or is it possible to get there without writing in that council will require that all lands need to be rezoned to get a permit?
To get there, we need to change the policy that allows for new dwellings to be built on private roads. My sense is, and I might be wrong, but my sense is unless we have these attendant kinds of protection measures, the province might give us some jam on that. Maybe not, but we can't change the zoning requirement from public year-round public road frontage until the policy's changed. So that's the sequence of events that has to take place.
Okay, I think when it comes to character for me, if I wanted to build something that somebody else might think is god awful looking, they might not like my taste in design. I maybe want an updated modern design with, you know, I have stainless steel railings on my deck and glass panels where everyone else has log homes or wood-sided homes up and down on the waterfront. Now I'm going to put this great big modern looking building in there. Would that fall under, well, it doesn't follow the character of the area? Could that be like a strike against somebody? Because that's the thing that I don't think is good to have.
My feeling was it was more about taking a remote area where there's a small service road that feeds just waterfront properties, but someone else owns the lands on the opposite side. And is there a case in anyone's mind that if you were to place a building or dwelling in that remote circumstance, is there any situation where you might say, well, that is altering that character of that particular neighborhood? And I think that's for someone to make that determination. And that was what was attempted here, was to put it in a context that, you know, it really has to have some significance in changing that neighborhood from how it's historically existed to something now that's different. To me, that's a possible argument that could be made. But if the argument is that anybody that has one of these lots should be allowed to automatically have a building permit for a dwelling, it kind of loses its significance in my mind. And that's fair. That's for council to make that determination.
Mr. Mayor?
I guess the only thing I would point out is that somebody can do what Councillor Woods described without any of this at all, providing they are on a publicly maintained road. So if they want to build this, you know, this very ultra-modern glass and steel structure on this side of the Washkish Road or the side of Edgewood Road or whatever, I don't need to ask for rezoning. They don't need to do anything. They just need to get a building permit. And as long as it meets the building code, they're have a septic permit, they're good to go, right? Am I missing something? That's so
No,
so they're going to change the this is right in the middle of a virgin forest or whatever. They're going to change the character of the virgin forest. But and by the way, if they wanted to do it on a waterfront lot, if they have a cottage lot and they want to do it there, they could do it there too, right? We don't have a heritage committee that comes and says, well, sorry, what you're building doesn't fit in with the landscape, so we want you to change it.
That's what I was trying to get at, Mr.
Yeah. And I only reference the submissions as having sort of come forward to say that they want a role, and it may be council's determination that they shouldn't have a role, and that's fair enough.
Mr. Mayor, is Councillor Woods finished or not?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, no, I want you to
Yeah.
finish if you want. Okay, so I have a couple comments. John, if we put it together as, because I think we've got uniformity here on council on 99% of this. But if we put it as we, I think, want it, and as discussed tonight, and it goes to the council or it goes to the province, and they come back and say, we're jammed up on this or that or whatever, we always have the ability after that to make a change and resubmit. Do we not? That's number one question. So I don't, and again, I reinforce that character can stay in when it comes to subdivisions, severances, things like that. But I think council's saying, character shouldn't come in if you just want to put a building on one of these 60 lots. I think that's what we're saying. And I think that's the desire of council. So, why wouldn't we just go with the desire of council, redo this thing, bring it back 2 weeks from now or whatever, and we'll take a look at the new draft based on what we said tonight. Because I don't see us in too many areas of disagreement. And we happen to be council. We need to make these difficult decisions as best we can. And, and obviously, so those are kind of my thoughts. I don't think we're that far apart, but what we have in front of us isn't the document that we need to pass. So it needs to be redone, in my opinion. Thank you.
If I can just be sure that I'm understanding this, Mayor Comrie. So I think the only criteria that I think I'm hearing would be B, C,
D.
So B, C, there wouldn't be an E because you're just going to be able to get a building permit. So there's no way to trigger an assessment. There's no F, and we have a G, but we just say that you encourage the participation in private road maintenance. And H sort of goes without saying. So that's the change I think I'm hearing being proposed. I don't want to misunderstand what the change will be, so we can get this moving forward. And to answer the other question to Councillor Lamb, yes, there's a back and forth process between the province and the municipality once it's adopted. So there will be a period for, call it, negotiations.
But I don't follow why we don't need E, for instance, firemen, or why we don't need F, servicing. Like, why do we have to take those up?
Think about what you're saying. You're saying, okay, I own one of these back lands, and you're saying all I need is to get a building permit. So I go to the building inspector with this new regime, and he simply says, okay, you comply with the setbacks, the height, the coverage. Therefore, here's your building permit. That process does not allow for any assessments because it must be applicable law. And those assessments are not applicable law.
But E, environment, says any land division. So I interpret land division as a severance or a subdivision or anything like that. So why would we take it out? There's no land division if you're just building.
It would come out, but it would be included in land division for sure.
Yeah, well, why would we take the whole thing up? Land division, just define it as severances or that sort of thing, right?
That's included elsewhere in the plan, so I think it doesn't actually play a
Okay,
role.
as long as it's in there. And what's wrong with F being in there? that we're satisfied the proposed development will not have any short or long-term financial implications on the service costs of the municipality. I guess it come out every time you build anything. I guess you have some sort of financial consideration. So maybe
Yeah, you
that
would
should.
Again, you wouldn't be able to undertake such an assessment at the building permit process level.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not able to escape the the problem that we are talking fundamentally about two different situations. We are talking about a situation which is somebody wanting to build a single building on a existing piece of land versus someone wanting to, do land division. And I think all of these things that are here would apply to land division. If the person wants to subdivide or create do severances or create a subdivision, new lot creation versus an existing lot, then everything that is in this list should apply to that. It's just a question of, can we somehow attach the words land division to this so it makes it clear that it has to do with land division and we're not preventing someone from getting an existing a building permit on an existing lot that they own if they're not dividing it?
Well, the way that the province looks at development, it includes land division or rezoning. So these criteria would apply if you're rezoning, but if we're taking the rezoning out and allowing an automatic development eligibility for these lands, then it's taking it out of the definition of development. So land division is a different animal. It has all its attendant assessments that we know of, and they'll be relevant. This was a case where, okay, backlot owner Smith, will allow you to get a permit, but you have to convince us of these criteria. If you're not going through a rezoning process, then you're going straight to a building permit and it's not development. You don't need any of these criteria particularly. Not only do you don't need them, you can't ask for an assessment, for example. Building department can only ask for things that are listed under applicable law. Like it can't ask for an environmental assessment, for example. So we are removing the 60 lots, to refer to them as that, from any assessments if we're going to hand them over to building eligibility. They just go straight to a building permit. So if I'm reading it correctly, then I think we just reword it with B, C, G, and H.
But are you suggesting that then that if somebody wants to subdivide, they don't have to do
No, that's a different section of the plan. It triggers other considerations and triggers other Planning Act requirements and other provincial policy requirements.
So that's the same principle as for a severance, is that correct?
Yes.
So unfortunately, I don't have the whole plan sitting in front of me on the screen here, but are you saying that section 9.06 private roads applies to that doesn't apply to subdivisions? It only applies to somebody getting a building permit for their lot?
In the land division section, that presents a number of different policies that council can make those assessments on. And so it's a different program that you're considering. So it'll have all the associated assessments, natural heritage considerations, environmental considerations. So there are required appropriate this type criteria there. That doesn't remove those. This was a way to say, like, you cannot have a permit for a dwelling unless you go through a rezoning process. You want to take that away because we're not asking them for an application, which application would have had all these associated kinds of considerations.
The application for rezoning, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, but so this section only applies to would really only apply to a single, somebody seeking to build a single dwelling on this
That's right.
private road.
Yes.
Well, I guess that's something that we'd have to consider whether if that's the case, whether in fact the reference to character can come out, but
Well, so I guess my conclusions from this discussion is it's not necessary because you're going to go right to a building permit for these 60 lots.
yeah, I don't, well, so my question is, if we did that though, does that adequately take care of the concerns that people had? And the concerns that I heard people had said, I don't think they were concerned about somebody building one building on a, I mean, maybe some were, but I think what they were concerned about was a whole subdivision going in.
That's correct.
And they're not being appropriate. And I think all of these conditions that are listed here should apply on, and by the way, I think if you're gonna, you know, if you're going to build even one dwelling on the lot that's on the private road, for example, that the owner of that lot should agree to contribute to the maintenance of the road as an example. So, but I'm not sure that we couldn't. Well, you're telling me we can't put that, there's no other way to make that a requirement other than to have a rezoning. Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, because the rezoning allows you to add conditions or requirements as part of the approval process. But right now we're taking council out of the approval process. We're handing it over to the building inspector. The building inspector is governed by the Building Code Act, which has a list of applicable law, none of which includes the kinds of things that we're talking about.
Mr. Mayor?
So you couldn't do it with a site plan agreement, put it into require a site plan agreement or something like that, eh?
You could require a site plan, but if you were doing a site plan sort of across the set of backlots that we think exist, that's a process in itself. You know, and how involved it is. I mean, I've done site plans that have cost $50,000, and I've done site plans that are $500. So it's difficult to kind of have one set of criteria. And there's some interesting changes in the province in that regard. They're saying that councils are required to delegate the approval of site plan to staff so that things can happen faster, but that's different.
Yes, I noticed that, but I'm just saying, is there something that says you can't have an agreement, you can't have a condition or provision in a site plan agreement that says that the individual will contribute to maintenance of the private road?
Oh yeah, you can do that through a site plan agreement. That's got to be registered on title, and we'll have it'll have the attendant details, etc. Most site plans need to have a survey, for example, that kind of thing. So if you want to allow these property owners to go strictly to the permit process, that's an impediment as well.
But you could still do it though. I realize it creates extra work, but it
Yeah.
doesn't need, that sounds to me like a less than a $500 one as opposed to a $50,000.
Yeah, I'm talking, when
One.
I talk about that, I'm talking about hotels and shopping centers.
Yeah,
for example.
I know. I'm just saying, it isn't the same impediment as the rezoning, which the fee for it is like, what, $2,500?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So it's and it's got to go through the whole.
You've got to go through lawyers for the
rigmarole.
registration of the
Yeah.
agreement, et cetera.
Well, okay. I don't. I guess we've been at this for now an hour and a quarter, I guess. It sounds like we're not ready to. That we still need to work on a few things. Is that the consensus of the?
Yep.
Okay, let's if you don't mind, just in the interest of moving on with the rest of our agenda, I'll, unless there are further comments that need to be made at this juncture, I'm going to suggest that we end our committee of the whole and carry on with some other things. Any further comments before we do that? If not, could I get a motion then to reconvene to a regular council meeting?
I'll make
I'll
that
move,
motion.
Councillor Woods.
Okay, I heard Councillor Gorham Matthews first and Councillor Woods second.
If I may interrupt, Mr. Mayor, there is one more item, and that's the housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment for short-term rentals.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I apologize. You're absolutely right. Okay, so what we need to do then is we need to we'll just put that motion in abeyance for the moment. There is item 2.2 is a proposed zoning bylaw amendment that is used to support some changes that we're proposing to make with respect to short-term rental units. And once again, we have, as you know, there is a committee working on the short-term rental bylaw, and we did receive legal advice that we should amend the zoning bylaw to create some clarity around something that could be a stumbling block to enforcement. So we have a report from our planner, John Jackson. And John, if you wouldn't mind, please just give us an intro into this.
Yeah, certainly. The matter was actually brought forward through the bylaw enforcement part of the municipality, and it's working with the Crown to be able to put some very strong teeth into the enforcement procedures. And so the Crown has recommended that there are a number of judgments made that his experiences told him would allow a better enforcement regime if we changed a couple of provisions in our zoning first. And then once those were done, then he would go through with the committee the kinds of changes that were needed in the licensing bylaw for short-term rentals. So this is kind of a step one that he's recommended that we tweak the definition of short-term rentals or rental units. And then once that's done, the next step, which would be a review of the licensing bylaw, would take place. So it's pretty straightforward. The changes that he's requesting are a little bit on the subtle side, but I put a lot of store in this crown in terms of his experience on this particular issue. So I think I'm pretty comfortable taking his advice on these suggested changes to the bylaw. So this is a township-wide bylaw. We put an ad in the paper and on the website and bring it back to council for a public meeting.
All right, thank you, Mr. Jackson. You have in your package a note from the Crown Prosecutor Paul Dre explaining why he thought we should do this, and you have a draft of a bylaw that would enact this revision and explanation of what's going on with it. So again, I'll open it up to questions and comments from councilors.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go first. I guess the overview is that, you know, since, and I was part of the original bylaw back some years ago, I support allowing short-term rentals in the community. I think it's good versus, you know, barring them at all, which I think is what Sequin did. And we gotta, you know, kind of take our head out of the sand here. The advent of Airbnb and the ramifications of that are great now and only going to get greater later. And the issues that I had with the current bylaw that we have was that for years I've heard, mostly from our bylaw officer, that it's unenforceable. You know, the 2 weeks leeway, you know, that you could rent without a permit is a big problem, and that's gone, and I agree with that. The other thing that I wanted to ensure was that if you advertised your place for rent in a short-term situation, that you need a permit. You need a permit to do that. So, you know, and I think that's, kind of taken care of in here. At least I hope it is. The other two concerns that I kind of had are to do with insurance. People, if you're going to turn your place into a short-term rental situation, whether it's 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever, in the summertime, you ought to have appropriate insurance. And I think we need to have some sort of assurance from the person getting the license or permit. And I think there has to be a lot more rigor, by the way, in administering any new bylaw in this area. But I think we need assurances that they've you know, contacted or told their insurance company that they're renting, because otherwise I fear that if there was a rental and they didn't have the proper insurance, it might not be covered. And the long arm of the because have a bylaw in place that somehow the municipality gets caught up in this because the person didn't have liability insurance or whatever to cover renters. So that is a concern of mine. I don't know whether the new committee, because I was on this committee until a couple months ago. So I have the concern about insurance. I also have the concern because I've had lots of people contact me on this from around the province, South Bruce and a number of other areas. But let me think of the last part. Oh, a code of conduct. Some municipalities have a code of conduct that sort of says, if you're going to rent, here's sort of a code of conduct that you need to make sure your renters know or that you agree with or whatever. So those are my general concerns with it. I don't want to overcomplicate it. So I'd like either, you know, my questions addressed on what I brought up. But those, you know, again, I thank the committee for their work on this. You know, now that we've taken the obstacles out to enforcement, we need to get on with it. I think I heard in the community there's only 19 permits or something like that that we have within the community. I might be out, but that's what I remember on it when I was on the committee. And that's ridiculous. There's 19 people renting at the end of my lake. And so what we have right now doesn't work. And if we're going to, put something in place that's still not going to work, then we haven't achieved very much. So those are kind of my thoughts. I think we need a lot more enforcement, not just called into the bylaw officer and it's only on a complaint basis. I think there has to be more rigor. If bylaw is needed extra bylaw services are needed for parking in Wawashkesh, I think they're also needed for this sort of thing if we change the bylaw, because this is, to me, even more time. And again, I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but I'm telling you, Airbnbs are coming. The final thing I have to say is, what is the fine? People are getting $600 and $800 a night for these places, right? I know it. Just look on Airbnb. And the idea that, if you go wrong or you do something, you're going to get $100 fine means nothing. It means absolutely nothing when you're getting that level of money on a nightly basis. So in order to make something with teeth in it, I think you need enforceability, and I think you need a substantive fine or some regiment or whatever that takes care of the bad actors, right? Because this is what it's all about, is people that break bylaws and have no regard for the municipality or their neighbors or anything like that. So those are my comments on this. Again, I thank the committee for the work they've done. I don't know whether anyone wants to address my concerns. Hopefully they will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I will address your concerns quickly, because we don't have the short-term rental bylaw in front of you. This is tonight, this is a change to the zoning bylaw, which is really just an enabling change to make it so that some of the things that we're wanting to put into the short-term rental bylaw itself will be enforceable. But I can assure you that the issues that you raised are being considered by the task force. We have some very good sort of model bylaws that we've looked at that have all of the things that that you mentioned, Councillor Lamb, in them. And at its last meeting, the task force went through and took a look at what content we thought should be in the bylaw. And the things that you mentioned, advertising without a permit, for example, would be an offense. There would be both Part 1 and Part 3 Provincial Offences Act charges would be included in the bylaw. And there has been discussion around the code of conduct, which is in several of these model bylaws and so on. So we're at the stage where we're trying to put together a bylaw. We just want to get this done, this particular step of fixing the zoning bylaw done, so that when because that'll take a little bit of time, and once that is in place, it'll come together with the rental bylaw, which hopefully we'll be able to get in front of council in the next couple of months. I would think we should have something. So
thank you, Mr. Mayor. That alleviates a lot of my concerns. What about insurance? Is that being considered too?
Yes, insurance is on the list. There is a list of requirements that renters have to meet, and it's quite
okay.
It's quite rigorous compared to what we've had in the past, and it is in the best bylaws that we've looked at as sort of models have. That's certainly one of the things that's in there. So
and that's all coming back to council for review at some point.
Oh, it'll, yeah. It basically is a major redraft of what we currently have, right? So
Good,
You'll
thank
see
you.
a lot of new and different things.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments about the zoning bylaw amendment that's in front of you? Councillor Woods.
Mr. Mayor, I have a
Yeah.
quick one. I can't disagree with much of Councillor Lamb's comments there, but I guess we'll leave that if that'll be coming back. I just have one other question. So for legal advice, did we only get it from Paul Dre Legal Services when it came to this? Or are we going to be looking at, is Paul Dre is just a paralegal, if I'm correct, right?
You're correct.
But are we also going to be looking at getting a lawyer to take a look at any of the changes we'll be doing with the rental bylaw?
I don't know that whether that hasn't been discussed at this point is all I can tell you, but we might want to do that. Some of the other bylaws that we looked at clearly were prepared by, I would say, by lawyers. I think you can tell by the sort of the level of rigor that's in them. But yes, we might, that might be a step we would want to take. I take it. Are you recommending that?
I am. That would be my recommendation. I know this was, I don't know if it was myself or Councillor Lamb that brought this up. It would have been a while, months and months ago. I just know that paralegals, as far as corporate or municipal bylaws, that is outside of their scope of practice. So if we're going to be looking at getting a bylaw amended or rewritten, we should probably be talking to a lawyer.
Well, okay, thank you. We're at the stage where we're trying to determine the content of the bylaw, the policy content, if you will, and we're I would say just about ready to finalize that, and then we'll get to the drafting stage. So that's
Okay,
where we're at
thanks.
in the
That's
process,
all.
but thanks for your comment. Any other questions or comments? All right, can we now then reconvene to, or if there aren't, can we reconvene to a regular council meeting, please? Councillor Gorham Matthews and Councillor Woods moved and seconded. Are you still okay with that? And it's 8:35 p.m. And I'm assuming that no one is objecting. All right. So that brings us then to the business arising, and the first item is that 5.2, which is the housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment. And I would look for a mover and seconder for the following, please. Whereas John Jackson, municipal planner, has presented a report to the council of the municipality of Whitestone regarding a housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment, revised definition of a short-term rental unit, dated April 25th, 2022. Be it resolved that council receive this report as information, and that council direct staff to schedule a public meeting to be held on June 21st, 2022 in respect of the proposed housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment. Would I get a mover and seconder, please, for that?
I'll move, Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Councillor McKinnon, seconded by
I'll second.
Councillor Gorham Matthews. Thank you. Is there any discussion of this motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
so I take it on June the 22nd or 21st, or sometime before that, that we'll get the detail of the actual amendment, like some of the things we talked about. Like at that meeting, we're going to be able to say, here is the new bylaw, or what are we going to do on June 21st?
Well, on June 21st, you will have you will have a bylaw amendment which contains the changes that are on page 27 of 118 in your package. So you can see that is, you can see it's a draft bylaw number. It says XX 2022 to amend the zoning bylaw for the purpose of enacting a revision of the definition of short-term rental. So that's what you will see for approval at the public meeting on June 21st.
So not the detail of what we've been talking, like, we're just making this minor change, and what
This-
will we tell the public? The detail of the actual bylaws coming at some point?
Yeah,
Like,
so
why wouldn't the whole thing come for debate at a public meeting? Whatever the changes are that are being contemplated. Why wouldn't we finish the proposed bylaw and bring that to the June 21st meeting? Or am I seeing this incorrectly?
well, it's because this is an enabling step. I don't know if Madam CAO, do you have a comment on that? I mean, I suppose we could have left it until the whole thing was all together, but we're trying to get it. We're trying to get this out of the way, because remember, this is not the short-term rental bylaw. This is an amendment to the zoning bylaw to define what a short-term rental is. So it's just clearing the way for the other bylaw to be done. And the zoning bylaw, of course, has the reason we're talking June 21st is that there's a notice period involved.
Okay,
Madam
mean-
CAO, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, you're correct. This is one piece where we need to take the current bylaw. I'm working on the rewrite. It will need to go back to the task force, I suspect, a couple of times, just to make sure that I've captured everything that the committee has asked for and others have asked for, including Councillor Lamb, who's made some good comments, things that we've talked about offside. So I don't know at this point, because I've been busy with other things, including preparing for the election, whether the bylaw will be ready for the June 21st meeting. We can certainly try, but there are a number of steps to manage the bylaw piece, as opposed to this is a separate. It allows, it will be incorporated into our new bylaw, but it does require the zoning bylaw amendment. Whereas our new bylaw doesn't need a public meeting. It simply can go to committee of the whole for discussion and public input. So
okay,
hopefully-
I understand. Thank you.
This one has a slightly longer runway. That's why we're doing it now, if you want to look at it that way. So
It's
is
just
there,
if the public asks, I guess, we're making this step.
yeah,
But the detail of everything else that we've talked about, codes of conduct, whatever, is coming. And that
Yes,
will be a
it's-
separate discussion at a committee of the whole sometime this summer, I guess.
that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Is there any objection to this motion then to direct staff to schedule the June 21st public meeting for this? All right, I'll conclude that that is carried. Now, we have next on the agenda, item 8, we have a couple of items, they're financial items that need to be dealt with or at least according to our policy, are dealt with in a public meeting. So I would like a mover and seconder, please, to move into a public meeting at, we'll say, 8:42.
I'll make the motion, Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb, seconded by,
I'll second Councilor McEwen.
thank you, Councillor McEwen. All right, so very quickly, I will, well, I guess I should call the question. Is there any objection to going into a public meeting? All right. Thank you. So just a few housekeeping items. I will introduce the council. Councillor Beth Gorham Matthews, Councillor Joe McEwen, Councillor Joe Lamb, Councillor Brian Woods, and myself, Mayor George Comrie, and we have with us tonight several members of staff. We have our CAO clerk, Michelle Hendry. We have our treasurer, Manish Kulal, who I introduced to you earlier. We have Barb Cribbett, who has been acting as our interim treasurer until recently, and is still helping us out as a financial consultant. And I'm not, well, I think our fire chief is on the phone somewhere too, but anyway. So we have our finance department. Once again, I'll ask if anyone has a pecuniary interest in the matters that are to be discussed. And hearing none. Thank you. So we are going to, we would normally, if we were all in person, pass around the sign-in sheet so that we could take a roll call. But we do have a list of those those members of the public who have their names up. We also have a number of phone numbers, and some of them I recognize who they are and some of them I don't. So but the rule that we'll follow is that if you wish to speak, the public are permitted to speak. But before you do, please introduce yourself and address whatever you have to say through me as the chair. And so the first item that we have is a staff report labeled FIN 2022-07, which is for adoption of the proposed 2022 operating and capital / special projects budget. So I will now ask our clerk if any letters or related correspondence have been received that we need to enter into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. None received.
Thank you very much. So next, I will ask if there are questions or comments from members of the public about the proposed 2022 budget. Okay. Are there any any further questions or comments from councilors? We're going to come back and have a motion when we come out of the public meeting. So
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll have a statement when we come out and go to pass the budget to make. But the only question I have on the numbers are, I guess, good news that we've got a surplus this past year of 246,000, of which 78,000 will be covered of our shortfall, which leaves the tax rate increase at 3.5%, which I think is very reasonable given today's inflation, et cetera. So I'm happy with that. My question is, what happens to the other 160 or 170 after we pay the 78? Where does that go into? General revenues, or what happens to that money? Thank you.
Okay, that's a question for I don't know. I see Barb is, are you going to answer?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Yeah, the remaining amount in the past has remained in the surplus account, but what I have done in the budget itself, and I think I talked about it at the top of page 2 of the actual report, that the balance of 168,000 of the accumulated surplus from 2021 be transferred into the asset management reserve. So what I've done is I have amended the documents in the budget to show that increase in the contribution to reserves, so that we basically would use up all of that surplus. Some of it cover the 78,000 would cover the shortfall, and the balance we're going to put into the asset management reserve. If you look at page 53 of 118 pages, you will see that the contribution that is going into the asset management plan, it's about a third of the way down the page, is $343,000. And that is the $175,000 that was recommended by the asset management plan, and also the $168,000 that we have that was remaining in the surplus. So for the purposes of this budget, I am putting it into, tucking it away into your asset management reserve, which is, as we know, one of the reserves that we want to continue to grow as much as possible.
So just as a follow-up, if, for instance, we go next year and we have a deficit, are we able to take monies out of the asset management plan to cover that deficit? Or once it goes into reserves, it's into reserves. I'm thinking of other boards that I'm at that have an operating surplus, and they have reserves. And once you put them into reserves, they're gone. You can't, you have a deficit the next year, you better be taxing people or doing something. So that's, I think you understand my question. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do understand the question. And technically, whenever you have a surplus or a deficit each year, you are supposed to clear it each time. So yes, if there was a deficit coming out of 2022, these are all discretionary reserves. They are your reserves. You have, with the exception of the Parkland Reserve, you control how they're used. So it would simply come to coming up with a potential shortfall coming out of 2022, and that would be covered out of reserves.
Thank you, Barb.
Okay, thank you. Barb, I realized I did not give you an opportunity to walk us through your report. Would you, for the benefit of those on the call, would you like to do that?
I certainly can. It's your pleasure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, going to the first page of the presentation. There we go. So that, yes, that is the main change from the April 5th meeting, is that the auditors confirmed the 2021 year-end accumulated surplus of $246,000. So that's basically the surplus that was there from 2020. We didn't need it in 2021. It stayed there. We also had a net surplus coming out of 2021 of another $80,000, and therefore that adds up to $246,000. So we're going to draw from that surplus the $78,000 required to fund the operating and capital special project budgets. And then we're going to take the balance of $168,000 and transfer that into the asset management reserve. And this proposed budget has been adjusted to reflect all of those changes. The revenues are approximately 11% over 2021. We have a proposed tax rate increase of 3.5%. We have $901,500 for grants and donations for the nursing station. And we also have grant funding of $119,399 from NORD for both 2021 and 2022, and that is for gravel. That was a much appreciated grant that we received. Expenses are approximately 5.24% over the 2021 budget. Salaries have been adjusted for CPI, the collective agreement, and forecast benefit increases. And the mandatory levels, which are the OPP and some of the other levies, have remained fairly stable for 2022. Our capital budget is $2,039,079. We have a number of, the details are in the actual documents itself. We have a number of expenses under general revenue, general expenses in capital and special projects, 143,000. I won't go through all of these numbers. They're covered mainly in the document itself and track somewhat similarly from 2021. Some of the special projects that we have for 2022, the office renovations of 165,000. The big project this year, the nursing station expansion of 917,000. Library 25,000, that's for the signage that they are getting. And we have a property purchase of 115,500. So again, the detail is in the document itself. Reserves, we are projecting the year-end reserve balance will be 1.248 million, and that is, of course, with the additional amount that we're sending in from surplus. So that has changed from what you saw at the last meeting. The 2022 contributions to reserves of 498,500. In 2021, that was 155,000. And again, the main increases there, the 175,000 increase that we recommended as a result of the asset management plan, and also the additional amount coming out of your surplus. The net, as far as debt is concerned, we have a small amount of additional debt that's being proposed for 2022. We're well within our limits of 673,211. That would be on an annual debt repayment limit. Again, more detail regarding the debt is in the actual documents themselves. But for this year, we will have a new debenture eventually solidified for the roads, a new one for the municipal facility, and the backhoe loan, we will be going to the bank to get a loan for that one. So currently in process, the 2021 financial statements are just being completed now. We just have a couple of little odds and ends that we need to wrap up. And again, we have the 2021 net operating income is noted there at 80,000 added on to last year's surplus. That gives us an accumulated surplus of 246,000. The required draw from surplus is going to be covered, and the balance is recommended to be going to the asset management reserve. This gives you a sense. There again is more detail in the actual report itself, but to give you a sense of what the 3.5% increase on taxes will be, it works out to about $16.82 per $100,000 of assessed value. So if you look at a home that is assessed at $300,000, the additional amount would be $50.46. And with the school board calculated into that, that works out to an overall increase of 2.65. For a $650,000 house residence, the change would be about $109,032. And again, that's a 2.65% overall. So that gives you a sense. And this is just a simple graph to show you roughly where we stand on residential tax rates. We're still towards the low end, even with the proposal. We're comparing actually here with 2021 sample residential tax rates that I could find. I would remind you that tax rates are really a reflection of what assessed values are like in that particular municipality and what types of services that are offered by that particular municipality. Normally, when you see high assessed values, you see a lower tax rate, unless you have a situation where, in the case of some of the, for example, Parry Sound, they offer a lot more services to their constituents. But generally speaking, that's what you would normally see, is that the higher the assessment values, the tax rate tends to be lower, because it's really just a case of taking your levy, how much money you need, and dividing it into the assessment that you've got. And I think that is the end of the presentation, and that's just a quick summary. There's quite a bit more detail in the report itself.
Thank you very much, Barb. Are there further questions or comments now that you've
Yes, Mr. Mayor?
saved the overview? Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, couple things, Barb. First of all, thank you very much. You have a professionalism to what you do that is absolutely fantastic and is better than I've seen in my 15 years on council, and I want to thank you for that. Just a couple of comments on what you said, just so the public sort of realizes it. The sign at the library, although it says 25,000, was covered by a grant that I know we wrote, or I said we was written by people, and so that grant, covered that. We didn't, tax people for necessarily for that. The second thing that I think is important is the nurses station. When we throw out $900 and some odd thousand, it kind of gives the wrong impression, because really when it comes to the impact of what Whitestone is paying potentially is not a lot of money at all. I think the shortfall with the contingency and everything was only $30,000 or $35,000, because we of course got grants for, I don't know, 600, 700,000, whatever. And then of course we've got other communities like McKellar and a little bit from Magnanawan participating, and we have fundraising. So I don't want people to have the impression that somehow we took 900,000 of monies and sort of taxed them for that, because I think the nurses station is a wonderful asset in our community, and people ought to understand the economics of it. So again, thank you very much. Those are my only comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Other questions or comments?
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor, again,
Councillor McEwen, go ahead.
to second what Mr. Council Lamb said. Thank you, Barb, for your excellent reporting. I was going to speak briefly on the nursing station also. Mr. Lamb covered it very well. We've had an exceptional group of people working behind the scenes and preparing grant requests and such. And Michelle, for number one here with the group, has done an amazing amount of work working toward the nursing station. And I just want to commend our people for what we have done. And I guess a big thanks has to go to the ministries who did put in $600,000 worth of loans. So anyway, that's one big project that's ongoing, and look forward to things happening this summer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Gorham Matthews, go ahead.
Yeah, I pretty much will just echo what everyone else said, that, this is really concisely laid out and easy to understand. It's hard to look at these huge budgets and follow them easily. So when we get these kind of reports, it really breaks it down for those of us that aren't used to working with these amounts of money. So it's a great report, and I just want to say that I think the community will be pleased at the various types of capital projects that we're undertaking this year. There's something a little bit for everyone. Lots of different roads are getting looked after, and I think it'll be good summer activity happening.
Okay, thanks. Anything else? Anybody else wish to weigh in at this point? If not, what I would like to do then is to move to item B, which is staff report FIN 2022-08, having to do with the consolidation of some of our reserves. And again, the report is in your package. I'll ask our clerk if there have been any letters or other correspondence received on this one.
No, Mr. Mayor, there has not.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions or comments from the, well, maybe I should start by saying, is there any explanation, Barb, that you want to give us about what's behind this?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you. If through you, Mr. Mayor, I think I had mentioned earlier on in one of the budget meetings that it would be a good practice to go through the numerous reserves that you have and look at doing a consolidation, just so it's a little easier to see and understand what money you have and understand what the plan is in terms of how that money is going to be used. So, and I worked with Michelle a little bit on this one too, and explained to her what I had in mind. Some of these reserves really haven't changed much since the last time I worked for you back in 2017. And they had very small balances. You weren't making contributions to the reserves. There didn't really seem to be a plan associated with that. And now, of course, you have embarked on some very good plans through your asset management plan. There are some additional steps that will have to be taken for that to get all of your assets in there. So it seemed like a good time to maybe do a cleanup of some of these little accounts that could be just leftovers from previous decisions that were made, and really focus the attention on, again, building your asset management reserve, which is more of a generic reserve that is attached to your asset management plan and all of the assets that are discussed in there. When we looked at these reserves, we were trying to be sensitive to, some of the historical reserves, that there might still be some purpose, or there may have been some purpose that we are not sure of at this point. We put together, or I guess more myself, put together this consolidation based on what we thought made sense. There may be some changes that council wants to make. Again, I'll remind you that the only reserve that you really can't do anything with on this page is the first one, which is the Parkland Reserve. And that is, that's controlled by legislation coming out of the Planning Act. So that one you cannot dissolve or move to another account. That one has to stay as it is. But the rest of them, quite a few of those reserves, you still are making annual contributions to, particularly some of the equipment reserves. So it's clear how much money is in there for individual items, so that when the time comes, we know exactly how much we have put away and how much we may have to take out through a loan or something like that. I think that one of the reserves that I wasn't too sure of, you have the cemetery reserve and the cemetery capital reserve. Now, those actual accounts have not moved since back in about 2013. So those balances are the same, but I just wanted to be sensitive to the cemetery itself. The money that you have for a cemetery is actually set out in your trust funds, which are separate, and they're not consolidated into your statements at all. And you have, under a care and maintenance account, you have about $58,000, if I recall. And then there's another maintenance account that has very little money in it. But those are separate and part of trust fund reporting that you will see in the financial statements. The cemetery reserve and cemetery capital here are older. They've been there, as I say, for quite a while. It's possible that you might want to retain them and see what you have there. So that's kind of it. I should also mention the building department stabilization reserve is also one that you just created that this year, and that one is somewhat controlled by legislation. And the gas tax reserve, although you're not using it, any leftover gas tax that we don't spend every year would have to go into that reserve. But we have been very good at spending that money on roads every year. So there is no money in that reserve.
Okay, thank you once again, Barb, for taking us through that. Are there any questions or
Yeah, Mr.
comments
Mayor.
from the public? Councillor McEwen.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Barb, on page, I guess it's 3 of your report, asset management, and looking at the difference from 21 to 22, that's the consolidation effect. Would councillors in the future see a breakdown of those particular reserves that were all consolidated under the asset management? Would that be in a future report in addition to the summary or summary?
The reserves that were consolidated into the asset management, I'm hoping that you can see them. They're shaded on page 2 of 3. They're the shaded reserves.
I see that, yes.
And those, basically what I did was I took the 2021 closing balance, and I've taken all of those balances and used those as the closing balance for the asset management. So in the page 3, you will see that the asset management reserve closing in 2021 has a balance of 383,129.
Mhm.
So that is the total of all of those shaded reserves on the previous page going into consolidated at the end of 2021, so you can see it, and then going into flowing through into 2022.
Okay, I guess my concern is that councillors, I know I go to look at the reserves all the time throughout the term, especially, and every year at budgeting. And a lot of those items won't show up now because they're all consolidated. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just wondering if there's, you deem them not significant enough to keep separate or separately identified?
Well, I mean, some of these smaller reserves, as I say, they may be leftovers from previous allocations to those reserves for special projects. Again, you have, with the asset management reserve, you've got a fairly large reserve there that is for assets. And therefore you have a fair amount of flexibility on how you use that reserve. The items that we've moved in there, I mean, for example, the Dunchurch Hall improvement, $1,100, clearly that's not going to do anything, and it really doesn't need a reserve in order to hold those kinds of monies. You have an infrastructure further up the page, of infrastructure reserve of $49,811. It's generic. It's not really clear what that's for. Again, your asset management plan, because it gets into so much detail around what assets you have, and it's going to get into further detail as you grow it to continue with all of your assets, and it will have a very defined, this is the money that you're going to need to get into your reserves in order to fund all that stuff. So it's just trying to attach as much to that whole plan as possible, because it is a plan. And some of the other things just seemed a little vague around what's the plan.
Okay, I guess if I looked at Labrash boat launch down near the bottom, 11.5, that will not show up anywhere now. It'll just be all under the asset management plan, right?
It would be, yes. Unless, and I'll be honest, I mean, unless council has a desire to show that separately so it can be seen. I'm not sure what exactly the plan is there, at what point there may be something, but it would not show up individually.
Mm-hmm. Okay, as long as we don't lose sight of the fact that we have certain project related labels there that would get lost in the shuffle somehow, but I guess not. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Are there other questions or comments on this consolidation?
Mr. Mayor?
Councillor Lamb?
Councillor Lamb, yeah. Good job, Barb. I'm completely satisfied with what you're doing, and I think it simplifies things, and so good for you. I'm fully supporting of this. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on this one? If not, I'll ask for a motion to reconvene into the regular council meeting then. Let's to adjourn the special meeting and reconvene the public meeting and
I'll make
reconvene.
a motion, Counselor Lamb.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb, seconded by
I'll second, Councillor Woods.
Councillor Woods. Thank you. And it's 9:13 PM. Okay, any objection to going back into regular council? All right. So that brings us then to the motions to consummate what we just talked about. So item 6.1. To adopt the proposed operating budget and capital special projects budget. I'll read the motion and then ask for mover and seconder. That the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone does hereby receive report FIN 2022-07 entitled Adoption of the Proposed 2022 Operating and Capital / Special Project Budget for information, and that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone hereby adopts the proposed 2022 Operating and Capital / Special Project Budget as presented at the April 5th, 2022 council meeting, and that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone does hereby approve the creation of the new asset management reserve, and that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone does hereby direct the CAO clerk to present a bylaw to adopt the estimates of all sums required during the year and to adopt the rates of taxation for year 2022. Could I get a mover and seconder for that, please?
I'll move.
Councillor Gorham Matthews moves, seconded by
I'll second, Councillor McEwen.
Thank you. Any further discussion about this motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I want to thank staff for all their hard work in putting this together. It seems to get a little simpler each year, which is a good thing. And I'm supportive of a lot of the things that are done in the budget. I really like the gravel going up to whatever it was, 188,000. I think there's a lot of good things in the budget. Having said that, I will not be supporting this budget tonight, so I'll be voting against it. And primarily because I never agreed with the office building and the 165,000 being spent there. I voted against it. I don't want to really get into the debate as to the reasons why. You know, if someone wants me to get into it, I certainly will. But I think we can dispense with that. So I will not be voting for it because of that expenditure, which I don't believe in. And I have no doubt that the budget will pass. But that's my position on it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments or questions on the motion that's in front of us? All right, thank you. The motion is to essentially to prove what we've talked about and to ask the CAO clerk to present the bylaw. The bylaw is coming to adopt the estimates of all sums is coming in a few minutes when we get to the bylaw section. So I guess I will ask the clerk to call the roll, please, for this vote.
Councillor Gorham Matthews,
Yes.
Councillor Lamb,
No.
Councillor McEwen,
Yes.
Councillor Woods,
No.
Mayor Comrie,
Yes,
That motion is carried.
thank you. Okay, so next one is a motion with respect to the reserve consolidation. Could I get a mover and seconder for the following, please? That the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone does hereby receive report FIN 2022-08 consolidation of reserves. And that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone approves the consolidation of reserves as set out in report FIN 2022-08. A mover and seconder, please.
I'll move it, Counselor Lamb.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by,
I'll second, Councilor McEwen.
thank you, Councilor McEwen. Any discussion? Is there any opposition to this motion? All right, hearing none, I will declare it carried. Thank you. That brings us to our consent agenda, which consists tonight of the regular council meeting minutes for April 19th, 2022, the special council meeting minutes for April 12th, 2022, and the Recreation Committee meeting minutes for March 1st, 2022, as well as the unfinished business, which is listed on page 4 of the agenda. So can I get a mover and seconder, please, that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone hereby approves the council meeting minutes of April 19th, 2022, and the special council meeting minutes of April 12th, 2022, and receives for information all other items contained in the consent agenda dated May 3rd, 2022. Mover and seconder?
I'll move.
Councillor Gorham Matthews, thank you. Seconded by,
I'll second.
okay, Councillor Lamb, thank you. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, just a comment. I appreciate all the things that the Recreation Committee is doing and thank them for it. I've had a couple of calls, and then I saw somewhere on Facebook today on one of these pages, people questioning when the fireworks was going to occur on a Friday or Saturday. I hope I put the right answer up when I said Friday, July the 1st. And I explained to people, you don't get the grant, I think, unless you do it on the holiday. So I just wonder if staff could maybe put something on the website or something out there somewhere saying that, generally the fireworks in Dunchurch are going to occur on July the 1st and more detail to follow or whatever. But anyway, that's just a comment thing. I have no other issues with the consent agenda. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, you gave the correct answer. The intention is to have it on Friday, July the 1st. We don't have to have it then in order to use the money that we've got, but I guess people need to realize that there is a possibility of two things that have deterred us in the past. Number one is a fire ban, and number two is inclement weather. And I guess if either of those, if the weather is sufficiently inclement or there's a fire ban, then we will have to rethink what we do when the time comes, I guess. But we'll hope for the best. So, any other comments or questions on the items in the consent agenda? If not, is there any objection to receiving and approving All right, thank you. That's carried. Which brings us to accounts payable. Could I get a mover and seconder, please, that the council of the municipality of Whitestone receive for information the accounts payable listing in the amount of $182,373.20 for the period August 16th, 2022 to April 30th, 2022. Did I say August? April 16th, 2022 to April 30th. Mover and seconder.
I'll move, Councilor McEwen.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen, seconded by,
I'll
I'll
second.
second, Councilor Wood.
I got Councillor Gorham Matthews first. Thank you. Councillor Woods. Any questions or comments on those items? Madam CAO, did you have a comment or question? No? Oh,
No, Mr. Mayor.
okay. I'm sorry, you're square lit up there for a minute. All right. Is there any objection to this motion? All right, thank you. That brings us back to number 10, or brings us not back, brings us to number 10, bylaws. And the first one was a bylaw to approve the official plan amendment number 2 that we discussed earlier. My sense of the matter is that we are not ready to deal with this. And so I'm going to suggest that we defer it for further work. Does anyone disagree strenuously with that approach?
I don't disagree at all.
Okay. I'm just going
I think we shouldn't even address it, let alone defer. To defer, you'd have to bring it up and then have official motions to defer.
Yeah.
I think we should just ignore it and move on.
No, that's what I'm suggesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Now we come to item 10.2, which is bylaw 28, 2022. I'll read the motion and ask for a mover and seconder that the council of the municipality of Whitestone hereby approves bylaw 28-2022 to adopt the estimates of all sums required during the year and to adopt the rate of taxation for the year 2022 be read a first and second time this third day of May 2022, and further read a third time, passed and properly signed and sealed this third day of May 2022 and numbered bylaw 28-2022. Could I get a mover and seconder for that, please?
I'll move, Councilor McEwen.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen, seconded by,
I'll second.
thank you, Councillor Gorham Matthews. Is there any further discussion on this one? All right, I will ask our CAO clerk to call the roll for the vote, please.
Councillor Gorham Matthews,
Yes.
Councillor Lamb,
No,
Councillor McEwen,
Yes.
Councillor Woods,
No.
Mayor Comrie,
Yes,
motion is carried.
thank you. Under item 11, there was which is business matters. 11.1 is entitled discussion regarding in-person council meetings. We had this discussion at the last meeting. I think it was suggested that we would bring it forward to a future meeting. Does anyone wish to discuss this further tonight? I'm not sure
I
anything.
would, no one else would.
Oh, well, all right, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I personally think it's time. I've had several calls from people asking this question. Of course, the complication is how you have a virtual meeting and a council meeting, right? But at some point you have to make the changeover, okay? There is stuff out in, I think, in the public that's been posted about the development out at on Highway 124 and the textile plant or whatever. And I think there's a lot of interest in the community to actually attend a public meeting in the community hall for that. So I think it's time that in June, we should go back into in-person meetings. We should try our best to do it virtually, or at least have people be able to listen in, even though they may not be able to ask questions or whatever at that meeting, but I think it's time. So that's kind of my position. If people don't want that, then I suggest we put a vote that we go back in June and we can vote on it and then go from there, but at least to be a public record of the positions of people with respect to that. So that's my feeling. At some point, we got to go back. I don't know whether we have masks or no masks. If we do go back in the community hall, we could know a lot of people don't go, but I mean, we could put chairs 6 feet apart or something. But there must be a way that we can accommodate this. I think other communities are doing it. If I'm not mistaken, McKellar is back in session. I don't know about other councils in the area. Maybe someone can answer that, but anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, are there? Well, I suppose if you're suggesting that we make a change, then are you making a motion to that effect, Councillor Lamb?
Yes, I would, that we commence in-person meetings in June of 2022.
A particular date in June, the first meeting in June, you mean?
First meeting in June, whatever, that's a month from now. No, yeah, I guess a month from now, right? I don't know when that meeting is, what specific day, but
Well, I guess I can tell you what it is. It's it would be June the 7th.
well, we got a month, I guess.
June 7th.
Got more than a month.
Okay, is there a seconder for Councillor Lamb's motion?
I'll second it.
All right, further discussion.
So, Mr.
Yes,
Mayor,
Mr. Mayor?
sorry, go ahead, Beth.
Oh, I was just gonna comment that when the library had their last event at the community center on the medicinal plants, it was a combination of people in person and on Zoom. It may not have been perfect, in terms of people being able to interact, but there were people online watching the presentation, and at the end they were able to ask questions when asked. So it may not have the whole elaborate setup that we have budgeted to complete, but I think we can proceed with a combination of virtual and in person in a manner that will allow people to still interact.
Are there other comments?
Mr.
Councillor
Mayor,
McEwen.
just thinking of, better than most of us, the logistics of the operation of the community center's electronics. Would it be more reasonable to think we'd do an outreach on audio versus trying to do video from the community center? if we did a dual purpose.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's only, it is only going to be an audio meeting.
Okay.
There isn't, we don't have a mechanism right now for all of the people to participate in a Zoom call. And it means that, I mean, the people who are physically in the room to participate in a Zoom call. And it means that the mechanisms that we would normally use to, keep track of who's on the call and who wants to speak and do all of those kinds of things would not work very well. I mean, you can have a limited number of people participating via audio remotely, but the majority of them are not going to be, you're not going to be, the people in the room are not going to be able to see who they are. They'll hear them all right. Assuming that they can get there's some way they can get the attention of the chair to, we're not, I want to be clear, we are not ready and won't be ready without having some additional equipment installed to have a real hybrid meeting where everybody can see and be seen and hear and be heard. The people who are remote will be at some disadvantage, I would argue, I mean, not as far as listening to what's going on. Yeah, no problem. But
Yeah. Well, Mr. Mayor,
we could try to do what Councillor Gorham Matthews has suggested, which is to say to people, well, you have to come in with Zoom. But the question is, there's going to be one person, and it would have to be the chair of the meeting. I can't see any other way to do it. It would have to be one person who is, so that's the person that they're going to see on the screen. So instead of what you're looking at tonight, where you can see all the participants, I'm going to be able to see that, but everybody else, including the other folks who are in the room, are not going to be able to see that. Unless, because I don't think there's not a really good mechanism. If everybody in that room tries to come on using Zoom, using a cell phone or a laptop or whatever, we're not going to have the bandwidth to we're certainly not going to have the bandwidth to do it via video with video. So,
well, Mr. Mayor,
as long as everybody understands that that's what's going to happen, I think, and I mean, like I'll be perfectly honest. I think my preference is to wait until we have more of our sort of technical issues resolved and better internet bandwidth and a bunch of things, but which would put us probably later on in the year. And if there is a desire for people to have some sort of a town hall meeting or some subject, Councillor Lamb mentioned the concerns that people have down around Lorimer Lake, Shawnee Lake, and so on. I mean, we can have a meeting to discuss those. The problem is at this stage of the game, we have no information to give to anybody that's gonna help them. So, I mean, they could people can always ask for items to be put on the agenda of the council meeting. It's just, and we could do it the same way we are. I don't know that that's stopping anybody. And I'm guessing on June 7th, a lot of those folks will not be in the municipality in any case, but it's,
well, Mr.
it's
Mayor,
up to council what you want to do.
Mr. Mayor, I don't see participants on Zoom here very frequently. Like there are about 2 or 3 of us on Zoom. That's it in our meetings, in the last 2 or 3 meetings, even though there are a lot of participants. So if it was just an audio setup, That was my question. Could we handle an audio setup?
Yeah, we could handle an audio setup.
So it's not impractical then.
Yeah. The other stipulation I would make is that if we're going to have any significant number of people in the room, for 3 hours or whatever, I think people need to be masked. I'm not.
Yeah.
We're as everybody knows, we're seeing accelerated rates of spread of this virus, and if people are not ending up in the ICU at the same rate, obviously, but if you spend long enough time in a closed space with you're gonna get exposed at some point in time, and some of us at least are trying very hard not to do that. So I think we would have to have some protocols. And
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Councillor Gorham Matthews made a good point. I've had calls from people about the library and the agricultural presentation, that they were very happy with it, and they thought it went over very well. So I don't see a big issue with you controlling and having, as the chair, knowing who may be in on Zoom, as you're doing right now. It sits in front of you. For the most part, people don't participate on an ongoing basis. As long as they can hear what's going on, and as long as you're kind of in control, then it doesn't bother me that I don't see the others that are on the call. So I think we need to attempt to do it. To wait until the end of the year, which is really, a new council, I don't think that's what the electorate want. I think they want us to go back to meetings and try to accommodate as much as we can a hybrid model of some sort. And so I think we need to give it a try. And again, my motion speaks to what I think we should be doing. Thank you.
Okay, are there other comments or questions about this?
Mr. Mayor? Okay.
Councillor Woods, go ahead.
I'm not opposed to going back to in-person meetings. Myself, I always like going to the in-person meetings. I mean, ideally, I think we'd all want a perfect hybrid model, but unfortunately, we're not there yet. It'd be nice if we were, because I think the amount of people that we've reached with using the Zoom and the audio call-in is a great addition to our council meetings. So I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I don't know what protocols exactly you would want. I mean, as far as masks go, I completely understand people that do want to wear masks, but I also completely understand people that don't want to wear masks. And if we're distanced properly, we have air cleaner systems in the community hall. I mean, if someone's afraid and they want to wear their mask, then by all means wear it, but I don't think we should tell anybody that they have to.
So is this conditional on installing some sort of air purifying system in the community hall? Because there isn't one there now.
I thought we had an air exchange system put in the building years ago, to be honest with you. But if we don't have one, that's something that we should have in all of our municipal buildings, is an air scrubber. It's a simple attachment to the HVAC systems.
It's just an HVAC system with fans. The air all blows from the end where the cloakroom is. And circulates back again. There's nothing special about it.
There was no HEPA filter installed on anything in any of our municipal buildings for air clean? Really? Well, that's something that we should definitely be looking into for all of our municipal buildings, to be honest with you.
Well, so you still want to do it?
Well, I go in person, no problem. But that's fine by me. If that's what the consensus of everyone else is, sure. We can do that. And if we find that it doesn't work at this first meeting, we could always switch back, no? Will that make sense? We can
Yeah.
try one for a test run, and if it doesn't work, we switch back?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can. No, I'm probing the question though, with respect to the air circulation. I mean, if it were up to me, the stipulation would be that those in attendance wear masks. The masks
Why?
are there to protect other people, not to protect you. So if you don't care whether you get sick or not, that you say fine. I understand people are not concerned to wear a mask to protect themselves, but what about the other people who might be concerned? And again, some people in our municipality, I know there are folks who are not concerned about this, but there are some people in our municipality who would not go into the meeting if people were unmasked, right? And again, it depends how many people are there. Like if there's only 10 people or something, the risk is relatively low. If you can space everybody out, so on. If there's 30 or 40 people, then I'm one of the people who has a concern, right? I'm not okay with that personally, with being unmasked with all those people being unmasked. Just saying to me, oh, George, you can wear a mask. That doesn't solve the problem because it's
Mr.
Anyway.
Mayor, I hear what you're saying, and I'm not in disagreement. I guess I'd ask Councillor Gorham Matthews when they had their meeting. I don't know how many were in the community hall. Were they all masked, or was there a requirement of that? And all the other things that are in the community hall, whether it's walk fit or anything else, is that are people masked? So those are just questions. And again, I'm not in disagreement with necessarily what you're saying. I've never had COVID, and I hope I don't get it. My personal feeling is at some point everyone's going to get it, but that doesn't mean we put ourselves into a position where we do get it. But anyway, so can perhaps Councillor Gorham Matthews can comment.
Yeah, I did have my hand up. I was going to mention that. Thank you, Councillor Lamb. So the last few events I've been at the community center, it's been people's personal preference. When we had the medicinal herbs meeting, it was probably about maybe half and half. Some people left their mask on, some took it off. When we had the event for Earth Day, there's a few people wearing masks, but for the most part, people didn't. So, I think we're at the stage now where it needs to be someone's personal preference in terms of assessing their own risk factors. If we think that the June 7th meeting is going to be heavily attended, perhaps a meeting that we don't want to start off as a in-person meeting, stay with virtual for that meeting, and then when we get back to our regular boring meetings, when we have just Bob there, then that would be a better meeting to start with, everybody spaced out. And I would prefer, I wear a mask all day at work. I'd prefer to come to a council meeting and have the choice to whether or not I'm going to leave it on, not have to leave it on, if I'm being honest.
Thank you. Don't forget Rodney. He comes too sometimes when we're.
No, he's not allowed to come anymore.
Okay.
Until I'm
Sorry.
done. And then you can have him back.
But anyway, I appreciate your comment.
Mr. Mayor, just as a comment, Prairie Sound's not masking, or pardon me, not meeting till the end of the month. I happen to be in Prairie Sound when they're doing an outside ceremony, so I moseyed over, and even outside spaces where everyone was wearing a mask. So they have, I guess, some unwritten rule or policy, or maybe it's preference, but everyone is just on a courtesy note, respecting each other's masking sort of notion. I'm a mask person in public right now. So anyway, personal
All right.
preference.
Well, okay. So in the interest of time here, we're We're getting along to almost a curfew here. So is there, there is this motion on the floor that we resume in-person meetings on June 7th. Can I
I can make an amendment to my motion? It was my motion, wasn't it? Yeah.
yes, it was your motion.
Okay, so I would put in with masking as a personal preference into the motion somewhere, and we'll vote on it.
Does the seconder agree to that? Councillor Gorman Matthews?
So I'm fine with that.
Okay, I'm going to ask the clerk to call the roll, please, for the vote.
Councillor Gorman Matthews,
Yes.
Councillor Lamb,
Yes,
Councillor McEwen,
Yes.
Councillor Woods,
Yes.
Mayor Comrie.
No,
That motion is carried.
all right, thank you. 11.2, a motion to approve donating our old message board to the Legion. Could I get a mover and seconder, please, that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone hereby donates the recently replaced double-sided signboard from the Dunchurch Community Center to the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 394, located at 2130 Balsam Road and Highway 124 in Dunchurch. Would someone like to move that?
I'll move, Councillor Woods.
Thank you. Seconded by,
I'll second Councillor McEwen.
any discussion on this motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was the one that kind of brought this up last meeting. So I was approached by someone from the Legion that was curious about what we were doing with our sign. Anybody that drives by the Legion can obviously see the wear that's on their sign, and they've struggled with COVID and having to be closed for much of the past 2 years. They have to they kind of remind me of their big community club, in terms of not being able to have functions, and they still have to maintain their building. So, I think this would be a nice gesture for us to support their events so that they can advertise them nicely along the highway there, and show that we support having the Legion in the community.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Gorman Matthews. Any other comments? Okay, is anyone opposed to this motion? Okay, hearing none, I will declare it carried. Okay, 11.3 is support for, and it's Bill 279 Environmental Protection Amendment Act, which basically calls for new washing machines to be equipped with microplastic filters. So this is to stop microplastics from entering our water, essentially. And it has it's got 2 pages of whereases. I think everybody has it in your package. I could read it if you want, but I wonder, in the interest of time, if you would agree to take it as read, and perhaps we could get a mover and seconder, and then I'll ask, this did come to us, I think, from our Environmental Stewardship Committee, so I might ask Councillor Gorman Matthews to just introduce it when, but let's get a mover and seconder first if we can.
I'll move it.
Thank you. Councilor Gorman Matthews moves, seconded by
I'll second it.
Councilor McEwen. Did you want to comment on this?
Sure, yeah, and I fully endorse you not reading the whole 2 pages because it is really long, but you did a great job of summarizing it. It's definitely a motion that we'll just go to the government and let them know that we support the Great Lakes Initiative to have these filters put on washing machines as opposed to people having to buy them. Like right now, you can go out and buy a filter for your own washing machine, but it would be more proactive if washing machines came with this filter.
Okay. Are there questions or comments on this particular one? I don't want to rush things along, but I think it's a good, I think it is worth supporting. All right, then, if there's no comments, I'll ask if anyone is opposed to the motion. And hearing none, I'll declare it carried, and we will indicate our support to, staff will indicate our support to the various people that are identified in the motion. So that brings us to item 12, which is correspondence. Whereas the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone has reviewed the correspondence items as listed on page 5 of the May 3rd, 2022 Council agenda. Now therefore be it resolved that Council received the correspondence items for information with the following extracted for further discussion. Discussion or action. So could I get a mover and seconder, and then we'll populate our list here.
I'll make the motion, Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb, seconded by,
I'll second Councillor Woods.
thank you, Councillor Woods. Now then, going back to the various items. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my list back. It's on page 4 of your agenda, so you got to go back towards the beginning. And so we've got a list in front of us. Anybody want item A, OPP calls for service billing report? You want to speak to that one, Councillor McEwen, or no?
It's very simple this time around.
Oh.
It's basically a wash. So if anyone has any
Okay.
questions, so be it.
Okay, anybody want item B, Grey Highlands resolution to adjust HST rebate on new homes? Item C, Count Township of Tudor and Cashel. Regarding
Just ask
Dixie Moss?
whether anyone has any.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any to bring out? That's the question.
All
Oh,
right.
I do.
Go ahead, Councillor Gorman Matthews.
Could we discuss I, please?
Yes, thank you. I knew there were a couple of things. I just trying to figure out which ones they are. Okay, this is floating accommodations.
Yeah. And J as well, please.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Those are the ones that I was going to suggest. Yes. Okay. So J is Lorimer Lake Association. Okay. Any others?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just briefly, F, please.
F. All right. Culture, that's the Culture and Rec Center minutes. All right, so I'm just looking at the time here. We're coming up on 10 o'clock, so I think this is going to take a couple more minutes, hopefully not a whole half hour, but could we pass our curfew resolution, please, to extend by a half hour? Because 10 o'clock is 3.5 hours. I need
I'll
a
make
mover and
that
second.
motion.
Okay, Councillor Gordon Matthews, seconded by,
I'll second
I'll
Council
second,
McEwen.
Council.
all right, Councillor McEwen. Anyone opposed to that motion? All right, thanks. That gives us a little bit more time. We don't have to use it all up. Item F, the West Ferry Sound, it's actually the minutes of the Shared Services Board is what it's really called, but it's for the West Ferry Sound Recreation and Cultural Center. Councillor McEwen.
Mr. Mayor, on page 107, 2.3, there's a request for a second cash flow request from funding partners. And they're asking for 20%. And for public's information, I think we should give a little bit of information on that if we can. It's 20% of their total financial commitment to the project. And that's by May 30th, 2022, which is like this month. So I'm wondering if we can have a little bit of an explanation of where we're at with that.
Okay, I'll ask our CAO to comment on that, I think. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As council is aware, we are not part of the Municipal Services Board, nor am I, as the CAO of Whitestone, part of the steering committee. That request for cash flow does not involve Whitestone. We've not been asked, and of course, there's other commitments that have to be met prior to the municipality making a contribution. So this information is these minutes are here for information. The information is new to me, as it is to council. I'm not at these meetings, so there has been no request to Whitestone, and I don't expect there will be.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item I is an item that came to us from Seguin Township, and they actually passed a resolution. It's in regard to floating accommodations. And some of you will have seen, there's been coverage of it in Focus newsletters and so on about what's going on down around Gloucester Pool, I think, where the pictures are from. That's in Georgian Bay Township. And essentially what's happened is that folks have purchased, and there are, I guess, companies that sell these things. They have purchased floating sea containers, which are put together into a giant sort of a raft with sea containers on them, and that's their accommodation. And they launch it from somewhere, and or the person you buy it from launches it, and you use it like a houseboat and take it around from place to place and anchor it wherever. And so you don't pay tax, and you can move. They're motorized, so you can move them around from place to place. But they're of course, these folks don't pay taxes, and there are issues with disposal of waste of various kinds and so on. And so what Seguin Township did, and by the way, townships, Georgian Bay Township did the same thing. They have basically asked the government to create regulations to do this, as opposed to leaving each municipality to create some sort of a pass some sort of a bylaw prohibiting them or regulating them in some manner or other. And the suggestion has been made that we should support such an approach. So that it could be dealt with uniformly by the province and not left to each municipality to fend for themselves. So have I captured that reasonably well, Councillor Gore Matthews? Is that?
Yes, you did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was sent to me from one of the members of the stewardship committee, and he was thinking that it would be prudent for Whitestone to lend their support either to Seguin's proposal or create our own, basically drafting. What they've come up with here is that in terms of environment and the size of our lakes and such, it would be prohibitive to have these kinds of vessels on our lakes, and there'd be no control over waste management and such. So we're not trying to ask the municipality to research this and reinvent the wheel or anything. I think what Seguin has come up here with is a thorough synopsis of what this would mean to our community as well. So we would like to see our municipality support a similar motion.
Right. Is there any other questions or comments about this particular one? Maybe I should ask then, Councillor Gore Matthews, would you be prepared to move that the Council of the Municipality of Whitestone supports the Seguin resolution?
I'd make that motion.
Floating accommodations dated April 19th. There is the resolution is in there. Am I correct? I've got
Yes, it's under Schedule A at the end.
All right. All right, so we can just support that resolution then. So Councillor Gore Matthews is moving that. Sorry, I'm just making a note here on the order paper so we have it. It's from correspondence. Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it, Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Any further discussion on the motion? Is there any opposition to us supporting that resolution? Okay, hearing none, I think we can move off of that. And that leaves us with the Lorimer Lake Association one. And I noticed that we have two representatives of the association on with respect to this particular correspondence item. So it's a request that you made regarding of the official plan. I guess I will ask the correspondents if they wish to speak briefly to it.
It's Gary Monahan, if I could speak, Your Worship.
Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah. Approximately 15 years ago and prior to that, there was no severances allowed on Lorimer Lake whatsoever. And 15 years ago, for a period of 10 years, there was only one allowed on the lake total between McDougall and Whitestone. And in the last 5 years, basically Whitestone has taken the position that there'd be no new severances on Lorimer Lake. And what we're looking for is just kind of enshrining that statement in the new 5-year plan. And taking things in context, 15 years ago, when there was no severances allowed on the lake whatsoever, since then, climate change has been a factor. We all saw what happened to BC with the fires and the destruction of towns and all the floods. And so climate change is real, and all the lakes, not just Lorimer Lake, all the lakes in the area will be impacted by climate change and will put a stress on the lakes. Since 15 years ago, we've probably had 15 new severances on the lake, and there's probably been 10 plus lots that have been developed. So the lake is already put under pressure. So it's important to us to try to minimize any further development on the lake. So as I said, the last 5 years, Whitestone has said no new severances on the lake, and all we're looking for is actual wording in the 5-year plan to kind of nail that down.
Okay, thank you, Gary, for that. And we have your request in hand here. Are there comments or questions from councillors? I'm not suggesting that we're going to pass a resolution on this tonight, but if you want to, since folks are here, perhaps. Councillor Gorham Matthews.
Yeah, I just had a question, Mr. Mayor. So we have this request and we have the Gooseneck Association lake plan as well that was submitted to us that had some suggestions as well to changes to their lake plan in the official plan. I'm just wondering, where do we go with this information? I'm sure Gooseneck's wondering as well what we're doing with this information. Are we putting their information and this information from Lorimer into a file for when we do look at the official plan again? Or I'm just curious, I'm sure Gooseneck's wondering too, when we're going to address their issues as well.
Okay, well, thank you. And I guess I don't really have an answer to the question, but you are correct. And I was going to mention this, that in fact, we did receive a delegation from, as you know, from the Gooseneck Association asking us to do specific things to incorporate some amendments into the official plan. And I think council should decide when they want to do this. I mean, we have two choices, I suppose. So one is to to consider amendments on the interim basis, such as the ones that we were discussing earlier tonight. I think we have time to do that in this council year if we want to. There's the other option is to defer it to a more comprehensive review of the official plan and the zoning bylaw, which are both involved, of course. And that might, given the resources that we have and the time we have and so on, that might end up being a job for next year's council. So again, I don't think we need to make a decision on it tonight, but I suggest that we should try to do that at a next meeting soon and give some sort of an answer to folks who are legitimately wondering, well, okay, what are you going to do with the input we gave you? So are there other comments? Councillor McEwen, did you have a comment?
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, I believe our official plan amendment, or pardon me, review is up at the 10-year mark, which would be, I believe, about 5 years from now or 4 years from now, if I'm not mistaken. This lake is managed by the LCAH, the Lakeshore Capacity Handbook guidelines, which is pretty stringent and such. And I know it comes into play pretty seriously when there's anything happening that we're involved in on that lake. So certainly do appreciate where these folks are coming from and what their interest is on that lake. And preservation of it is first and foremost for them. I'm not sure, other than receiving the information now and maybe doing some kind of an analysis of receiving information to bring forward for whoever is involved in the next official plan revisions, might be the way to go. Like, is there sufficient movement of properties and such on that lake right now that it's that critical that we address it? especially with this present council, which only has like 6 months to go.
Mr. Mayor, sorry. I don't know whether
yeah.
council, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to answer Councilor, or try to answer Councilor McEwen's question. And I guess I have to be honest, when I first saw this, I thought, well, this particular item, I thought to myself, well, for all intents and purposes, there is no new lot creation taking place on Lorimer Lake, at least on the Whitestone portion of it, as far as I know. If those of you, some of you will recall that what was mentioned earlier is that some years ago we had a sort of a phasing out period where we did allow for an additional, I think it was 1 lot per year for over 5 years or something like that, and eventually we exceeded that. So, you know, one wonders why there is a requirement to say new lot frontage has to be 150 meters if there are not in fact going to be any new lots created. And it doesn't matter how big they are. The reference to the LCAH is also in a sense a bit moot, because the reality is that we're not going to be involved in what people are doing. Well, I guess there could be still building permits and that sort of thing. So maybe that's a valid thing, but there won't be new lots created, and they won't be under site plan control and those kinds of things that we're talking about. So essentially, the only building even that's going on is replacement of existing dwellings or building on vacant lots that are already owned that are suitable for building. So, you know, and if they, even if they're not 150 feet, if somebody already has a piece of property that they've had for some time, they can build on it if it met the requirements that existed at the time they got it. So, but anyway, I would only point out that there were similar requests that did come from Gooseneck. They also wanted to increase the minimum lot frontage, and there could be new lots on that lake. So, anyway,
Sorry.
That's just my observation. I mean, I don't know, like that. Well, I'm not sure. I'm not opposed to doing what they're asking us to do, but I'm not sure if it's going to change anything immediately. That's unless I'm missing something about this, and we probably should discuss this request with our planner before we try to formalize anything. Anyway, go ahead, Councillor Bland.
Yeah, thank you. Gary, thank you for the letter and for the presentation. I go back long enough that I remember the formula, and I forget what it was, but it was, as the mayor says, 1 lot per year. There was some sort of trade or whatever. So I remember all of that. With respect to the official plan, I hate to take exception to Councilor McEwen, but the official plan, in my knowledge, is up for review next year. It's a 5-year period, not 10. And I may be wrong, but I thought Mr. Jackson told us that, you know, the first year of the next council, there's going to be a review of the official plan. And that's an extensive document because it gets into each of the lake policies, et cetera. So it's not far off. I think to start one-offing it to Gooseneck and Lorimer, unless there's some really, really critical thing that's going to occur, you know, on Lorimer. And I think we've got, you know, the access is the biggest problem right now. But I think this is going to be addressed very quickly under a new council. But I may be wrong. If it's a 10-year review, then maybe we have to look at it. But I don't think we just one off it and say, well, Gooseneck gave us a letter, so we're going to do that. Because if you remember on this back lot development thing, I thought Wabash Cash and a bunch of others, we're lobbying that we need to take a look at all these things in the official plan review, right? And there are other things out there. And of course, you start to say, well, we're going to do that one, that lake, because they sent a letter. There may be many other lakes saying, well, hold on, what about my lake, right? Why don't you come and review Whitestone Lake or whatever, right? So I don't think it's far off. I think it's next year. So I think the mayor is right. We need to check with the planner. But if it is scheduled for very early in the next council, then I think that's where it's going to be dealt with. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
Be good to verify the 5 or 10 year thing, because I think we've had that looked up before. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take that
I
one on
agree.
advisement.
Sure. I agree.
Okay, well, thank you. I guess the motion to receive the correspondence, we didn't put to the vote, but is there any opposition to that? Now that we've done it, we've received and discussed the items we pulled out of it. So that then, well, my next resolution is a confirming bylaw, but that's not. I think there is councillor items first. Are there any councillor items?
Questions from the public?
Doesn't sound, yeah, doesn't sound like it. All right, so we'll do questions from the public then. Any questions from the public?
Hello, Mr. Mayor. It's Scott Mast. How are you?
Okay, thank you.
Good. I just had 2 quick comments, and it's actually just about the correspondence that was just spoken about. And not in regards to official plan updates, but it's simply, I think in order to put moratoriums on development, there has to be a lot of studies done, paid for by the municipality on lake capacities. And there's a couple different lake capacity handbooks and modeling out there, as there is also regarding septics these days. And I just wanted to make a quick point on another one. I know you guys have spoken about Gooseneck Lake, and I think I make a comment about that one, but about all lakes and associations to some extent, in that I think something that the municipality should be cognizant of. I'll use it as an example, that the lake association on that lake only represents about 40% of the property owners on the lake. It's not even the majority of property owners, it's the minority. And I think that should be something looked at when you're taking some of these reports in, that sometimes it's actually only the minority of people that are speaking. That's all I have. It's just really a comment on those 2 things. I think it should really be a lot of studies that are done before moratoriums or limits are put on, to make sure the right decisions are being made for the right reasons. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from the public?
It's Gary Monahan, if I could speak.
Gary, go ahead, please.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I know it's late. It's just concerning the EP zone of the wetlands and by Lorimer Lake and the resort. I've sent some correspondence to your worship and to the councillors about that. The wetlands were EP for many, many, many years. And then in January, we discovered that they've been changed to C2. After some detective work and stuff like that, we found that they got changed by just a bureaucratic brush. No merits given to the wetlands itself. It's just they changed a whole broad number of areas and rezoned them to the C2. John Jackson, and I sent this in the correspondence to yourself, in a letter he sent to Michelle. he mentioned that he did look at the wetlands on an area view, and that he thought that they should be EP. And he also said that he was going to keep that on his file, and that if council was to determine that they wanted to change it back to EP as it always was and as it should be, that he would have it ready to go and change back to EP. So my question is that I just wondering how you all feel about it, and if you feel that it should be changed to EP, when would that happen? And once again, thank you for your time.
Okay, well, thank you for raising this concern. We've received quite a lot of correspondence and calls and so on about it from folks who concerned folks in the area. I don't know if perhaps I can ask our CAO to if there is an update that you can give us that just on the current situation. Again, there is no, if you're familiar that the processes that we follow for people to do various things with their property, there is no, we have not had an application from the owners of the Lorimer Lake Resort to do anything. And no, I understand that folks from Fisheries and Oceans Canada are involved with them right now with looking at what it is that they're doing and trying to deal with those concerns. But normally, well, anyway, unfortunately, we don't have absolute control over what happens there, although
I'd like to see this sort of as a separate issue. What's going on in the wetlands, what's going on in the resort is one issue. This is just simply an issue of zoning where that particular EP land was by error changed to C2. And we're just looking to have it rezoned back to EP, regardless of what development plans or regardless of anything the resort's doing. I never mentioned the resort or the development plans. It's just, it was EP, in error, it was changed to C2. And if you'd seen the pictures of the wetlands beforehand, which I shared with you, and all the species that were in there, you would think this is something we should protect. This was EP, it should be EP. And so it's sort of a whole separate issue from what's going on at the resort.
okay, well, I will ask if our CAO has any comment. I have no information about how this change of zoning occurred, but
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Michelle, do you
Yeah.
have any comment? Sorry, Councillor Lamont.
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a lot to add. We do know that the Fisheries and Oceans folks were there last week. Our public works manager who knows these folks and has been working with them has reached out to them and asked for a report back on their findings and whether there was going to be any orders. I know that the resort was required to put up some silt fencing. There was no stop work orders on some of the work they're doing. We just don't have that information yet, and we're seeking it, and we'll share with council and others as it comes forward. The owners of the resort are well aware of the concerns. In fact, I did show them the before and after picture. I wanted them to see what the stark difference was between when it was really wetlands and when it was drained. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and we're trying to get the answers. I am doing a site visit myself on Thursday at the invitation of the owners, so I can see for myself what's being done and where it's being done. They certainly are allowed to work on their own property if they're making some improvements to roads and driveways and that kind of thing. So I want to see the extent of what they're doing. And that will help me as I report back to council on this further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I guess on this, I mean, the picture's worth 1,000 words or whatever they say. The picture was stunning to me, the before and after, so it concerns me. I don't think we have a lot, in our toolbox to deal with it. Hopefully Oceans and Fisheries will. I don't know whether there's other provincial ministries that can and should get involved. I don't understand this idea that it was EP and then changed to C and it was a clerical error or something. I don't understand that. So maybe we can research more of what Gary's saying that way, so the council has more information as to what happened and why it happened. Certainly never came to council to say that should change, I don't think.
No.
So I don't understand. I'm not discrediting Gary, I'm just saying I don't understand what this error was, right? So can staff commit to at least get back to council as to what happened there and why, and because I think that's kind of important, right? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's Michelle. I do have that information, an explanation. It's a little bit long-winded, but I will share that with council tomorrow in an email from John Jackson.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments before we close? All right, if not, I will ask for a mover and seconder for the confirmatory bylaw, please.
I'll move it, Councillor Lamb.
Thank you. Seconded by,
I'll second, Councillor Woods.
and I'm going to assume that everybody's okay with that one. Adjournment.
I'll move, Councillor McEwen.
Moved by Councillor McEwen, seconded by
I'll second.
Councillor Gorham Matthews. That this meeting be adjourned at 10:30 p.m., which is the end of our time. So thank you all for your patience and perseverance. Tomorrow is May 4th, so may the 4th be with you. Have a good evening.
Good
Good night, everyone.
Take
Bye-bye.
care, folks.
Bye.
Night.